The crystal champagne flute shattered in my father's grip, sending shards and expensive bubbles across our mahogany dining table. My 30th birthday dinner had just transformed into a nightmare. I'm Blair, and this was supposed to be my milestone celebration. Instead, my mother Charlotte chose this moment to present me with an envelope containing what she claimed was evidence of my theft from the family business. The accusation hung in the air like poison. "Explain this," my father Harold demanded, his face turning that dangerous shade of red I'd grown to fear since childhood. He thrust the papers toward me, his hands trembling with rage. "I don't understand," I said, scanning the documents. They showed wire transfers, account statements, and a series of transactions I'd never seen before. "These aren't mine. I've never—" "Don't lie to me!" Harold slammed his fist on the table, making everyone jump. My sister Lindsay grabbed my hand under the table, squeezing it tight. "Harold, darling, please calm down," my mother said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I'm sure Blair can explain why she's been siphoning money into offshore accounts." I looked into my mother's eyes and saw something I'd never noticed before, a glint of satisfaction. That's when I knew. This was no mistake. This was calculated. "This is insane," I said, standing up. "I haven't stolen anything. Someone's setting me up." "The evidence is quite clear," Charlotte sighed, touching my father's arm. I didn't want to believe it either, but the numbers don't lie. Nearly $2 million, Blair. "What were you thinking?" Lindsay gasped beside me. $2 million? "I've already spoken with the board," Harold growled. "You have 24 hours to confess and return the money, or you're not only fired, you're out of this family." "Dad, please." "No." He stood up, towering over me. "I've given you everything. A position in the company, trust, responsibility, and this is how you repay me?" I looked around the table at the faces I'd known all my life. My father, veins pulsing in his neck. Lindsay, tears streaming down her cheeks. And my mother, wearing that perfect mask of concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I didn't do this," I said firmly, "and I can prove it." Charlotte's expression flickered for just a moment, so brief I almost missed it, but it was there. Fear. "There's nothing to prove," she said quickly. "The evidence is conclusive." "Then you won't mind if I hire my own forensic accountant to review everything?" I challenged, watching her carefully. "Every transaction, every document, every signature?" "That won't be necessary," Charlotte cut in. "We've already had everything verified." "By whom?" I demanded. "Enough?" Harold roared. 24 hours, Blair. Not a minute more." I grabbed my purse and stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You want the truth, Dad? Ask your wife where she was last Tuesday between 2 and 4 p.m. Ask her about the safety deposit box at First National. Ask her why she's so desperate to push me out of the company right now." Charlotte's face went white. Bull's eye. "Get out," Harold said, his voice deadly quiet. "Get out of my house." I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "Happy birthday to me, right? Don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure this is a celebration you'll never forget." The heavy front door slammed behind me with satisfying force. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd hoped I'd never have to use. "Ricky, it's Blair. Remember that favor you owe me? I need it now, and I need you to connect me with Emerson Fox." I got into my car and started the engine, my mind racing. My mother thought she was so clever, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She didn't know about the photos I'd taken last week or the conversations I'd recorded. She had no idea I'd been watching her for months, gathering evidence of her own schemes. She wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd forgotten who taught me how to play. As I pulled away from the mansion I'd grown up in, my phone buzzed with a text from Lindsay. "What's really going on?" I typed back quickly, "Truth time, sis, but not over text. Meet me tomorrow at the Blue Room, 10 a.m. Come alone." The city lights blurred as I drove, my mother's satisfied smirk burning in my memory. She thought she'd won, thought she'd finally found a way to push me out and take complete control. But she had no idea what was coming. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with proof. And I had plenty of that. The Blue Room was nearly empty when Lindsay walked in, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She looked like she hadn't slept, dark circles visible even under carefully applied concealer. "You look terrible," I said as she slid into the booth across from me. Yeah, well, watching our family implode will do that. She grabbed my untouched coffee and took a long sip. Start talking, Blair. What did you mean about Mom and the safety deposit box? I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo. This is Mom entering First National last Tuesday. Notice the timestamp, 2:15 p.m. She told Dad she was at her charity board meeting. That doesn't prove anything, Lindsay said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. No? How about this? I swiped to the next photo. Here she is meeting with James from accounting, the same James who verified those transactions in my name. Lindsay's hands started trembling. Blair, if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting, Mom's been planning this for months, I said, keeping my voice low. Remember when Dad had that health scare last year? She's been positioning herself ever since, trying to gain more control of the company. I'm the only thing standing in her way. But why? Dad gave her everything she wanted. I laughed bitterly. Not everything. She wants to sell the company. Dad would never agree to that. It's his legacy. But with me discredited and you already focused on your own career, she could convince him to retire, Lindsay finished, realization dawning on her face. Oh God, Blair. The waitress appeared with fresh coffee, and we fell silent until she left. There's more, I said, pulling out a small recorder. Listen to this. Charlotte's voice filled our quiet corner. James, I need those documents modified exactly as we discussed. Blair's signature needs to be perfect. Yes, the payment will be made as agreed. No one will ever know. Lindsay's face went pale. When did you record this? Last week. I've been watching her ever since I overheard her talking about handling the Blair situation on the phone. Why didn't you tell Dad? Would he have believed me? I asked. You know how he is with her. She's got him wrapped around her finger. The cafe door chimed, and I looked up to see my father walking in. My heart stopped. Speaking of the devil, I muttered. Harold spotted us and strode over, his face set in hard lines. Lindsay, go home. Dad, wait. Now. Lindsay shot me an apologetic look and squeezed my hand before leaving. Harold took her place in the booth. You've got some nerve, he said, trying to turn your sister against your mother. I'm not turning anyone against anyone, I replied. I'm just showing her the truth. The same truth I'm going to show you if you'll listen. The only truth I need to see was in those documents last night. Those documents are fake, Dad. Mom orchestrated this whole thing. His face reddened. Watch yourself, Blair. That's your mother you're talking about. Yes, my mother who's trying to frame me for embezzlement so she can push me out and convince you to sell the company. That got his attention. What did you say? You heard me. Why do you think she's been meeting with Vernon Industries? Those weren't charity lunches, Dad. They were acquisition talks. You're lying, he said, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. I pulled out the photos and the recorder. Am I? Take these. Listen to them. Look at the evidence yourself, but do it privately, where she can't explain it away. He stared at the items for a long moment before slowly taking them. If you're wrong about this, he warned. I'm not, but if I am, I'll sign a confession and walk away from everything. You have my word. Harold stood up, tucking the evidence into his jacket pocket. 24 hours, Blair. That hasn't changed. One more thing, I called as he turned to leave. Check Mom's calendar for next Tuesday. She has another meeting scheduled with Vernon Industries. Might want to show up unannounced. He left without responding, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. The seed of doubt was planted. My phone buzzed with a text from Ricky. Meeting set with Emerson. 2 p.m. today. His office. I smiled. Emerson Fox had been my father's business partner for 30 years. He also had his own history with my mother, one she thought nobody knew about. If anyone could help me expose the truth, it would be him. I left enough cash on the table to cover both coffees and headed for the door. As I stepped outside, another text came through, this one from an unknown number. Back off while you still can. Some secrets should stay buried. I screenshot the message and saved it to my evidence folder. Mom was getting nervous. Good. Time to pay Emerson a visit and show him exactly what Charlotte had been up to. After all, he deserved to know how she was planning to sell off the company he'd helped build. Let the games begin. Emerson's corner office hadn't changed in 20 years. Same leather chairs, same view of the city skyline, same smell of expensive cigars. He stood as I entered, his silver hair catching the afternoon light. "Blair?" he said, gesturing to a chair. "I must admit I was surprised to get your message." "Not as surprised as I was to find these," I replied, sliding a manila envelope across his desk. He opened it slowly, his expression changing as he examined the contents. Photos of my mother leaving Vernon Industries, copies of emails discussing company valuations, and a draft purchase agreement with his name conspicuously absent. "Where did you get these?" His voice was carefully neutral. "Does it matter? They're real, and you know it." I leaned forward. "She's planning to cut you out, Emerson, just like she's trying to cut me out." He sat back, rubbing his temples. "Your mother always was ambitious. That's one word for it. I have another: criminal. Those are dangerous accusations, Blair. So is falsifying documents to frame your daughter for embezzlement." I pulled out my phone and played the recording of Charlotte and James. Emerson's face darkened with each word. "Damn it, Charlotte," he muttered. Then louder, "What do you want from me?" "The truth. About everything, including what happened between you and my mother 15 years ago." His head snapped up. "How do you—" "I found the letters," I said, "hidden in that old filing cabinet in the basement. Very passionate stuff, Emerson. Does Dad know?" "That was a long time ago," he said quietly. "A mistake. A mistake she's been holding over your head ever since, right? That's why you've looked the other way while she's been making these backdoor deals." He stood up abruptly, walking to the window. "Your father is my best friend. Then help me save his company. Help me stop her before she destroys everything he's built." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Fox, Mrs. Mitchell is here to see you." Emerson and I locked eyes. He pressed the intercom button. "Send her in." "Hide," he hissed at me, pointing to the adjacent conference room. I slipped inside just as my mother's voice filled the office. "Emerson, darling, we need to talk about Blair." "Yes, we do." His voice was cold. "Sit down, Charlotte." Through the crack in the door, I watched my mother settle gracefully into a chair. She's making wild accusations, trying to turn everyone against me. You haven't heard from her, have you? Would it matter if I had? Of course it would. She's unstable, Emerson. The stress of the company, the pressure, it's affected her judgment. These delusions about me trying to sell the company. Like these delusions? He dropped the Vernon Industries documents on the desk. Charlotte's composure cracked for just a second. "Where did you get those?" "Does it matter? They're real, aren't they?" "Emerson, please. You know how Harold is about the company. He'll never agree to sell, even though it's the smart move. Sometimes we have to guide people to the right decision. By framing your daughter for embezzlement?" She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Is that what Blair told you? And you believed her? Remember who knows your secrets, Emerson. Remember what's at stake." "Are you threatening me, Charlotte?" "I'm reminding you where your loyalties should lie." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Don't make me an enemy, Emerson. You won't like the consequences." After she left, I emerged from the conference room. Emerson looked years older. "Well," I said, "that was illuminating." "She'll destroy us all," he muttered. "Not if we stop her first." I sat down across from him. "I need access to the company's financial records. All of them, going back 5 years. That's impossible without board approval, unless the request comes from a board member." I raised my eyebrows meaningfully. He stared at me for a long moment. "If I do this, there's no going back. Your mother will know exactly who helped you." "She's already threatening you, Emerson. What more can she do?" He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a security badge. "Level 10 access. It'll get you into the records room after hours. But Blair?" He caught my arm as I reached for the badge. "Be careful. Your mother isn't the only one with secrets in those files." I took the badge, tucking it into my pocket. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This could end badly for all of us." As I turned to leave, he called out, "Blair, for what it's worth, I'm sorry about everything." I nodded and left his office, my mind already racing with plans. Tonight, I'd get the proof I needed, but first I had to call Ricky. If I was going to break into the company records room, I'd need his expertise in digital security. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. You're playing a dangerous game. Ask Emerson what really happened the night of the merger. I smiled. Finally, a real lead. Time to find out what other skeletons were hiding in the family closet. You know this is insane, right? Ricky's voice crackled through my earpiece as I swiped Emerson's badge at the records room door. It was 11 p.m. and the office floor was deserted. Less talking, more hacking, I whispered. Are you into the security system? Almost there. Cameras are on loop. You've got 30 minutes before the system resets. The door clicked open and I slipped inside. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls, with a computer terminal in the center. Okay, I'm in. Talk me through this. Boot up the terminal, I'll remote in and bypass the login. I followed his instructions, watching as the screen came to life and codes scrolled past. How did you get so good at this stuff anyway? Let's just say my previous job wasn't entirely legal. Found it, accessing files from the merger period now. Documents started populating the screen. Financial reports, board meeting minutes, and... Wait, stop, go back to that email thread. My heart pounded as I read the exchange between my mother and the Vernon Industries CEO from 5 years ago. Ricky, are you seeing this? Holy shit, he breathed. They've been planning this takeover for years. And look who else was copied on these emails. James from accounting. He's been helping her cook the book since before Dad's health scare. Blair, there's something else. Check the attachment on that last email. I clicked it open and froze. It was a photograph of Emerson with a woman who wasn't his wife, dated just weeks before the original merger. The email text was simple. Insurance policy. Keep this safe. She's been blackmailing him, I said. That's how she kept him quiet all these years. Suddenly, the lights flicked on. I spun around to find Lindsay standing in the doorway, her face pale. What are you doing here? I hissed. Following you, she said, stepping inside. Blair, you need to stop this. Ricky, I'll call you back, I said, pulling out my earpiece. Mom knows what you're doing, Lindsay continued. She's furious. She said she'll press charges if you don't back off. Let her try. I gestured to the screen. Look at this, Lindsay. Look what she's been doing. She approached hesitantly, scanning the emails. Her hand flew to her mouth. That's not... She wouldn't... She did. She's been playing everyone for years. Dad, Emerson, us. We're all just pieces in her game. But why? We have everything we could want. Because everything isn't enough for her. She wants control. Complete control. Lindsay sank into a chair. What are you going to do? First, I'm going to copy all of this. I plugged in a USB drive. Then I'm going to... The computer screen suddenly went black. No. I frantically pressed keys. What happened? Someone remotely shut it down. I grabbed the USB drive. How much did it copy? Blair. Lindsay's voice shook. Your phone. I looked at my screen to find a new message. Nice try. Check your email. My inbox loaded to reveal dozens of photos. Me breaking into the records room, accessing files, copying data. The subject line read, Corporate espionage is a serious crime. She knew, I whispered. She knew I'd come here. We need to leave, now. Lindsay pulled my arm. Wait. I ran to the filing cabinets, yanking open drawers. There has to be hard copies. Blair, please. Found it. I pulled out a thick folder labeled Merger Documents, Original. Inside was everything. The real agreements, undoctored financial statements, and... What's that? Lindsay pointed to a sealed envelope that had fallen to the floor. I picked it up. The handwriting on the front was familiar. Dad's. It was dated the day before his health scare, addressed to Emerson. Take it, Lindsay urged. We can read it later. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. We killed the lights and pressed ourselves against the wall as a security guard walked past, his flashlight beam sweeping the room through the window. Once he passed, we slipped out and ran to the emergency stairs. We didn't stop until we reached my car in the parking garage. What the hell do we do now? Lindsay asked, breathing hard. Now? I pulled out my phone and dialed. Now we talk to Dad's lawyer. Violet needs to see this. Blair. Lindsay grabbed my hand. I'm sorry I didn't believe you before, about Mom. It's okay, but Lindsay, I met her eyes. This gets worse before it gets better. Are you with me? She nodded slowly. I'm with you. My phone buzzed again. Last warning. Back off or tomorrow's board meeting will be very uncomfortable for everyone. especially Harold. I started the car, my mind racing. The board meeting, of course. That's when she planned to make her move. We've got 12 hours, I told Lindsay. Time to see what's in Dad's letter. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of movement in my rearview mirror, a figure watching from the shadows. The game was changing, and tomorrow would decide everything. Violet's home office smelled like old books and expensive perfume. At 6 a.m., she looked impossibly put together in a crisp suit, reading Dad's letter with narrowed eyes. "This changes everything," she said finally, placing the letter on her desk. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Your father knew." She tapped the paper. "He knew about the planned takeover, about Charlotte's manipulation, everything. He was gathering evidence before his health scare." Lindsay gasped. "Are you saying Mom was responsible for Dad's heart attack?" "The letter suggests she may have been tampering with his medication." Violet's voice was grim. "Harold suspected but couldn't prove it. That's why he wrote to Emerson. Insurance, in case anything happened to him." My hands shook with rage. She tried to kill him. "And now she's trying to destroy you," Violet said. "The board meeting is in 5 hours. What's your plan?" I pulled out the folder from the records room. "We have proof of her dealings with Vernon Industries, evidence of cooking the books, and now this letter. It's enough to stop her." "It's enough to put her in prison," Violet corrected. "But timing is crucial. Charlotte will expect you to make a move at the meeting." "Then we'll make our move before." I turned to Lindsay. "Call Dad. Tell him to meet us at Violet's office in an hour. It's time he knew everything." Lindsay stepped out to make the call. Violet leaned forward. "Blair, there's something else you should know. Your mother came to see me yesterday." "What did she want?" "To draft new company bylaws. Ones that would give her full control if Harold becomes incapacitated again." My blood ran cold. "She's planning something for today." "Almost certainly." Violet opened her laptop. "Which is why I took the liberty of contacting some old friends at the SEC. They're very interested in these financial discrepancies." Lindsay burst back in, face pale. "Dad's not answering. I called the house. The housekeeper says Mom took him to the hospital an hour ago. Something about chest pains." "No," I breathed. "Not again." I grabbed my purse. "Violet, go," she said. "I'll handle the board meeting delay. Just get to your father." We raced to the hospital, breaking every speed limit. In the elevator, my phone buzzed with a message. "Too late, darling. Should have backed off when you had the chance." The ICU waiting room was empty except for my mother, who looked up with perfectly feigned concern. "Oh, girls, thank goodness you're here." "What did you do?" I snarled. "Blair." She stood up, affronted. "Your father had another episode. Thank God I was there to call the ambulance." "Like you were there last time?" I stepped closer. "What was it this time, Mom? More medication tampering?" Her eyes flickered to Lindsay, then back to me. "You're hysterical. The stress is clearly affecting you." "Mrs. Mitchell?" A doctor approached. "Your husband is asking for you." "Of course." She smiled sweetly. "Girls, wait here. Family only for now." "We are family," Lindsay snapped. "The board meeting starts in 4 hours." Charlotte reminded me softly. "Such a shame you'll miss it, waiting here at the hospital. I'll be sure to express your regrets." As she turned to follow the doctor, I grabbed her arm. "This isn't over." "Oh, sweetheart." She patted my cheek. It was over before it began. The moment she disappeared down the hall, I pulled out my phone. "Ricky, I need you to hack the hospital security cameras. Right now." "On it," he said. "What am I looking for?" "My mother, anywhere near my father's room or the pharmacy in the last hour." Lindsay paced nervously. "Blair, what if she really does something to him?" "She won't," I said more confidently than I felt. "She needs him alive to maintain control. This is just to keep us away from the board meeting." My phone buzzed. Emerson calling. "Tell me you got my message," he said when I answered. "What message?" "The board meeting. Charlotte changed the venue. It's happening at Vernon Industries in 30 minutes. "What? That's not possible. It's 4 hours early." "She called an emergency session. Blair, they're voting on the sale right now." I looked at Lindsay, who nodded. "Go, I'll stay with Dad." "Send me the address," I told Emerson. "And Emerson, stall them, whatever it takes." I ran for the elevator, dialing Violet as I went. "Meet me at Vernon Industries. Bring everything. It's happening now." Racing through traffic, I called Ricky again. Tell me you found something. Better, he said. I found the pharmacy tech she bribed. He's willing to talk. Send his statement to Violet. Another text flashed on my screen. Running out of time, Blair. Just like Daddy. I gripped the steering wheel harder. Mom thought she had all the pieces in place, but she'd forgotten one thing. I had nothing left to lose. The Vernon Industries building loomed ahead, its glass towers reflecting the morning sun. Somewhere in there, my mother was about to destroy everything my father had built. Not if I could help it. The Vernon Industries security guard tried to stop me, but Emerson was already waiting in the lobby. 14th floor, he said as we rushed to the elevator. They're about to call the vote. Did you do what I asked? He patted his breast pocket. Recording device, as requested, caught every word of Charlotte's private meeting with the Vernon CEO before the board arrived. The elevator seemed to crawl. How bad? She promised him insider information about our overseas contracts. Illegal as hell. Perfect. My phone buzzed. Lindsay, Dad's awake. He's asking for you. The elevator doors opened to chaos. Board members clustered in small groups, whispering urgently. My mother stood at the head of the conference table looking triumphant. Blair, she said smoothly, how nice of you to join us, though I'm afraid you're not authorized to be here. Actually, Violet's voice rang out as she strode in behind me. She is. As a victim of corporate fraud, she has every right to address this board. Charlotte's smile tightened. There's nothing to address. The vote is about to begin. The vote is suspended, Violet announced, dropping a thick folder on the table, pending a federal investigation. The room erupted in murmurs. Charlotte laughed, but I caught the fear in her eyes. Investigation into what? Fraud, embezzlement, attempted murder. I stepped forward. Should I go on, Mom? These are ridiculous accusations. Play the tape, Emerson. He pulled out the recorder, and Charlotte's voice filled the room. Once Harold's out of the picture, permanently this time, the board will have no choice but to approve the sale. The color drained from her face. That's doctored. Like the evidence you planted to frame me? I turned to the board. Check your emails. You'll find proof that Mrs. Mitchell has been secretly negotiating this sale for years, manipulating company finances and attempting to eliminate anyone who stood in her way. Phones began buzzing as Ricky's mass email hit their inboxes. Including her own husband, Violet added, whose medication was tampered with under her orders. We have the pharmacy tech's sworn statement. Charlotte's mask finally cracked. You ungrateful little... Mrs. Mitchell, the Vernon CEO interrupted, standing up. Is this true? Of course not. This is a desperate attempt by my daughter to... To what, Mom? I pulled out Dad's letter. To expose how you've been poisoning him, planning to seize control, destroying everyone who opposed you? You have no proof. Actually, Lindsay's voice came from the doorway. We do. She walked in, followed by our father in a wheelchair, still in his hospital gown, looking pale but furious. Harold, Charlotte whispered, you should be in the hospital. Signed myself out, he growled. Had to see for myself if what the girls told me was true. He held up his phone. Just watched your little meeting with the Vernon CEO. Very enlightening. Darling, I can explain. Save it for the prosecutors. Violet cut in. They're very interested in speaking with you. Charlotte's eyes darted around the room, finding no allies. In a flash, she lunged for her purse, but Emerson was faster. He grabbed it, spilling the contents, including a USB drive labeled contingency. Looking for this? I picked it up. Your insurance policy? Too late. We found all your blackmail material last night. You're making a mistake, she hissed. All of you. I built this company as much as Harold did. No, Mom. I stood directly in front of her. You just tried to destroy it, and now everyone knows exactly who you are. The elevator dinged, and 2 FBI agents stepped out. Violet nodded to them. Perfect timing, gentlemen. Charlotte Mitchell? One asked. We need you to come with us. As they led her away, she turned back one last time. Blair, remember what I taught you about revenge? That it's best served cold? I smiled. I remember, Mom. I learned from the best. The boardroom emptied quickly, the Vernon CEO practically running for the elevator. Dad wheeled himself to the head of the table, looking exhausted but relieved. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have seen it sooner. I knelt beside his chair. We all should have. The company is safe, Violet assured him, though we'll need to do damage control. Later, Lindsay said firmly. Right now you're going back to the hospital, Dad. And this time, I'm personally checking every medication. My phone buzzed one last time. An unknown number. Well played. But remember, some secrets stayed buried today. Don't go digging too deep. I deleted the message. Whatever other skeletons lurked in the company closet could wait. We had won the battle that mattered. Blair? Dad caught my hand. Thank you for fighting for the truth. I squeezed his hand, watching Lindsay gather his things. That's what family does, Dad. The real kind, anyway. Outside, I could hear sirens fading into the distance, carrying my mother away to face her consequences. It wasn't the birthday celebration I'd expected, but maybe it was the one we all needed. The next week passed in a blur of legal meetings, press statements, and hospital visits. Dad was recovering well, but the betrayal had aged him more than any medication ever could. I sat in his hospital room, watching him read through the company reports I'd brought. The board wants to meet tomorrow, I said. They're nervous about the publicity. Let them be nervous. He set down the papers. What your mother did, it's going to take time to rebuild trust. Dad, about the company. A knock interrupted us. Emerson stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. Harold Blair, we need to talk. If this is about the SEC investigation, I started, it's about the merger, the original one, 15 years ago. He closed the door. There are things you both need to know. Dad sat up straighter. Emerson, don't. They found the files, Harold. All of them. It's only a matter of time before the investigators piece it together. Piece what together? I looked between them. Emerson pulled up a chair. The company wasn't just yours to merge, Harold. You had a partner. Had being the operative word, Dad muttered. What partner? I demanded. Your Uncle Robert, Emerson said. Your mother's brother. The room went silent. I'd never heard of an Uncle Robert. He died in a car accident, Dad said quietly. 2 weeks before the merger. Convenient timing, I said, my stomach turning. Very, Emerson agreed, especially since he opposed the merger, was going to block it, in fact. That's enough, Dad snapped. No, it's not. Emerson turned to me. Your mother didn't start being manipulative recently, Blair. She's been playing this game for decades. Are you saying... I couldn't finish the question. The accident was never investigated properly, Emerson said. The police chief at the time was a close friend of your mother's. Dad's hands were shaking. I didn't know, not until after, when Charlotte let something slip. By then, the merger was complete. And you kept quiet? I stood up, anger rising. For 15 years? She had evidence, he said. Made it look like I was involved. Said if I ever told anyone, she'd destroy everything. The company, our family, everything. That's what was really on that USB drive, Emerson added. Not just recent blackmail material, proof of everything that happened back then. My phone buzzed. Violet, found something in the old files. Come to my office, now. I have to go, I said, grabbing my bag. The investigators will want to know about this. Blair, wait. Dad caught my arm. There's more. About Robert. About why your mother really wanted him gone. Tell me. He wasn't just opposing the merger. He was investigating Charlotte's connection to another death, your grandmother's. The room spun slightly. Grandma died of natural causes. That's what the death certificate says, Emerson said. But Robert had evidence suggesting otherwise. Another buzz? Lindsay this time? Mom's asking to see us. Says she'll tell everything. I showed them the message. Dad's face hardened. Don't trust her. She's trying to manipulate you again. Maybe, I said. But what if she's ready to confess to all of it? It's a trap, Emerson warned. Probably, but I need to know the truth. I headed for the door. All of it. Blair, Dad called after me. Whatever you learn. I'm sorry, I should have been stronger. Should have stopped her years ago. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. In the hallway, I called Lindsay. Meet me at Violet's office first. There's something we need to see before we talk to Mom. Already here, she said. Blair, it's bad. Really bad. How bad? Mom didn't just kill Uncle Robert. She killed 3 other people who got in her way. Violet found the proof in sealed records. I leaned against the wall, breathing deeply. Text me the address of Mom's holding facility. I'll be there in an hour. Be careful, Lindsay said. She's desperate now. Desperate people are dangerous. I know, that's counting on. I stepped into the elevator, my mind racing. All these years we'd lived with a monster, never seeing her true face. Now it was time to confront her, to hear her justify decades of murder and manipulation. My phone buzzed one last time. An unknown number again. Ask her about the summer house fire. Ask her why she really killed Robert. Some secrets are worth dying for. I saved the message. Whatever game my mother was playing, whatever secrets she still held, it ended today. One way or another, the truth would finally come out. The elevator doors opened and I stepped out into the sunshine, ready to face the darkness that had shaped our family for generations. It was time to hear my mother's confession. The prison visiting room was cold and sterile. My mother sat across from me in her orange jumpsuit, somehow still managing to look elegant. Lindsay gripped my hand under the table. My girls, Charlotte said softly. I knew you'd come. We're not here for a reunion, I said. We want the truth, about everything. She smiled that familiar, calculating smile. The truth? Are you sure you can handle it? Try us, Lindsay snapped. Start with Uncle Robert. Ah, Robert. She leaned back. My righteous big brother, always trying to protect me, even from myself, until he started digging into things that didn't concern him. Like Grandma's death? Mother was sick, Charlotte said sharply. She needed help ending her suffering. That wasn't your choice to make, I said. No? Like it wasn't my choice when your father wanted to sell the company to those vultures 15 years ago? Robert would have let it happen. So you killed him, Lindsay whispered. I protected what was ours. Charlotte's eyes flashed. Just like I protected us from the summer house fire that would have exposed everything. The insurance investigator, I realized, the one who disappeared. He was going to ruin us. I did what I had to do. And the others? I pulled out Violet's files. The accountant in 05, the board member in 12. Necessary sacrifices. They were people. Lindsay slammed her hand on the table. With families. Everything I did for our family, Charlotte hissed. To keep us powerful. To keep us wealthy. To give you girls everything. No. I stood up. You did it for yourself. Because you're a sociopath who can't stand losing control. She laughed, but there was an edge of desperation to it. You think you've won? You think exposing all this makes you powerful? She leaned forward. I still have one card left to play. Your hidden evidence? I smiled. The USB drive, already found it, along with the real records from the merger, the proof of your embezzlement, and your private accounts in the Caymans. For the first time, real fear crossed her face. It's over, Mom, Lindsay said. The FBI has everything. The DA is pressing charges for 4 counts of murder, attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. You're looking at life in prison, I added. No deals, no escape routes, just consequences. You ungrateful little... She lunged across the table, but the guards were faster, restraining her. I gave you everything. No, you took everything, I said calmly, and now we're taking it back. As the guards led her away, she screamed, You'll regret this, both of you. I'm still your mother. No, Lindsay called after her. You're just the woman who gave birth to us. There's a difference. Outside the prison, we sat in my car, processing. My phone buzzed. Dad, it's done. Board approved the restructuring. Company's safe. He did it, I told Lindsay. Dad secured the company. New board, new safeguards. And us? What do we do now? I started the engine. Now we rebuild. The right way. Blair? She touched my arm. I found something else in Mom's things. A letter from Uncle Robert written the day before he died. He knew what she was planning. He wrote that his biggest regret was not being able to protect us from her. Maybe we protected ourselves in the end, I said, by choosing truth over power, by being better than her. My phone buzzed again. Emerson. Board meeting tomorrow. They want to name you CEO. I showed Lindsay the message. She smiled. Take it. Show everyone what real leadership looks like. Only if you come back as CFO, I said. We do this together or not at all. Together, she agreed. No more secrets, no more lies. I pulled away from the prison, watching it shrink in my rearview mirror. My mother would spend the rest of her life there, surrounded by the consequences of her choices. You know what's funny? Lindsay said as we drove. She thought she was teaching us about power. Instead, she taught us about justice. And family, I added. The real kind. My phone lit up one last time. An unknown number. Congratulations, you won. But remember, power isn't just about control, it's about choice. I deleted the message without responding. We had all the power we needed now, the power of truth, of justice, and of real family bonds. Dad was waiting at the office with Emerson and Violet, ready to plan the company's future. A future built on honesty and integrity, not manipulation and fear. Ready? Lindsay asked as we pulled into the parking garage. I thought about everything we'd discovered, everything we'd overcome, about the strength we'd found in standing together against darkness. Ready, I said and stepped out into the light. Some people spend their lives seeking power, but real power comes from knowing who you are and standing firm in your truth. My mother never understood that, but we did, and that made all the difference.
Jennifer Morrison was organizing today's schedule in her mind while preparing for the morning. She checked the calendar app on her smartphone placed on the kitchen island to confirm the time of today's important meeting. Ava, are you ready? It's time for the bus. Her daughter's voice came from upstairs. 5 more minutes, Mom. Jennifer sighed lightly and smiled. A typical response from her 12-year-old daughter. She took a sip of her coffee and gazed at the well-maintained garden visible through the window. A spacious house in the suburbs. A successful career. A lovely daughter. This was supposed to be her life. Jennifer was a well-regarded real estate agent in the area. Her face frequently appeared in local advertisements and sold signs, and the name Morrison Estates had become a symbol of trust. Her expertise and sophisticated negotiation skills were especially valued in the luxury property market. Her eyes wandered to the family photographs decorating the kitchen wall. The image of her husband Robert caught her attention. Robert was a vice president at a major local investment bank. His work was always busy, but recently it had become extremely hectic. Late-night returns home, sudden business trips, and weekend emergency meetings had increased. Mom! Ava came running down the stairs, her long brown hair bouncing. What do you think of this hairstyle? Jennifer looked at her daughter and smiled. It's very pretty, honey. Ava sat at the kitchen table and stirred her breakfast cereal. Did Dad leave early again today? Jennifer hesitated for a moment. Yes, he seems to have a big project. In fact, Robert had left again before she woke up this morning. Last night, too, he had apparently returned after she had gone to bed. Recently, their conversations had become superficial. Good morning, good night, how's Ava's school? How did the meeting go? It was like obligatory small talk. Is Martha coming today? Ava asked. Yes, until I get back from an important meeting. Probably around 6 o'clock, Jennifer replied. Martha Green was a trusted babysitter who had been supporting the family since Ava was little. She was a former elementary school teacher with a warm and thoughtful personality. She came a few times a week to help with Jennifer and Robert's busy schedules. I promised to go to the library with Martha, Ava said. I need to find materials for my science project. That's nice, Jennifer glanced at the clock. Well, it's time for the bus. Let's go. Ava slung her backpack over her shoulder and kissed Jennifer. Mom, I hope your meeting goes well today. Thank you, honey. As Jennifer watched her daughter head toward the bus stop, she hoped Ava hadn't noticed the tension that had developed between her and her husband. Upon returning to the house, she paused in front of Robert's home office. It was a place she usually didn't enter. Something felt different. The door was slightly open. Robert normally took great care to keep it locked. Driven by curiosity, she went inside. Documents were neatly arranged on the desk. That was normal. But when she looked at the trash can, she saw torn pieces of paper. She picked them up and put the fragments together to find an address of an unfamiliar apartment. Her heart started racing. The phone rang, making her jump. It was from a client. Jennifer Morrison speaking. She tried to regain her composure. Jennifer, I'm calling for final confirmation of our meeting. Everyone is assembled for today's presentation. Yes, of course. I'll be there in an hour. After hanging up, she looked around Robert's office. The feeling that something was wrong grew stronger. Her eyes went to a shelf displaying a small collection of valuable antiques inherited from her parents. But something was missing. The diamond necklace inherited from her grandmother was gone. That's strange, she said to herself. I'm sure I saw it last week. There was no time. The important presentation was key to closing this deal. She put her doubts aside, packed the documents in her briefcase, and headed for her car. Martha was scheduled to arrive at 11. Everything should be fine. Ava would come home from school and go to the library with Martha. A simple routine. Yet Jennifer felt in the back of her mind that something big was about to change. She checked her appearance in the rearview mirror. Perfect hairstyle, confident expression. But behind her eyes lurked anxiety. Once I get through today, I'll have a serious talk with Robert this weekend, she decided as she started the car. It's time to clarify what's going on. The meeting with the client would begin in an hour. Until then, she needed to put on her professional mask and set aside her personal worries. But in her mind, the mystery of the torn address paper and the missing necklace swirled. This property will be an ideal residence for many families. Jennifer continued her presentation with a confident voice. From the expressions of the executives surrounding the conference room table, she could tell her explanation was effective. This project had the potential to become the biggest deal in her career. After months of preparation, the decisive moment had finally arrived. The revised financial projections indicate a 15% return on investment within 5 years. If you look at the next slide. Her smartphone vibrated, and Jennifer stopped mid-sentence. Normally she would put her phone on silent mode during meetings, but today she was concerned about Ava and had left it set to notify her of incoming calls. Looking at the screen, she saw it was from Martha. I apologize, may I have a moment? She left the conference room and stood in the hallway. Martha? What's wrong? On the other end of the phone came not Martha's usual calm voice, but a trembling voice in a state of panic. Jennifer, please come right away, something terrible has happened. Jennifer's heart nearly stopped. Ava? Is she all right? Ava is. Martha's voice faltered. She's physically fine. But, please, come home right away. I'm coming now, Jennifer said. I'll be there in 15 minutes. She returned to the conference room and apologized. A family emergency has occurred. I need to respond immediately. The client's chief executive frowned. Ms. Morrison, this meeting was scheduled weeks ago. I understand. I sincerely apologize, Jennifer said while trying to hide her distress as she packed documents into her briefcase. I'll have my assistant Sarah explain the details of today's materials. She is thoroughly familiar with this project. As she left the conference room, she worried about the impact on her career. But now, that was secondary. The tone of Martha's voice told the whole story. Something serious had happened. Martha, Ava, respond. Jennifer called them repeatedly from the car, but there was no answer. While barely observing the speed limit, she imagined one worst-case scenario after another in her mind. A traffic accident. A fire. An intruder. She covered the route that normally took 25 minutes in just 17 minutes. She parked her car roughly in front of the house and hurried out. Seeing the front door half open, her anxiety peaked. "Martha." "Ava," she called out fearfully. Entering the living room, she stopped at the sight. Martha was sitting on the sofa, hugging Ava. Martha's face was pale, and Ava was trembling. Documents were scattered on the coffee table. "What happened?" Jennifer rushed over to them. Ava looked up. Her eyes were red and wet with tears. "Mom. I'm sorry." Her voice trembled. Jennifer knelt beside her daughter and gently stroked her hair. "What happened? Can you tell me?" Martha cleared her throat. "I'll explain. This afternoon, when Ava came home from school, she said she wanted to know when her father would be coming home," Martha began explaining quietly. "She came home earlier than usual and tried to check his computer in his office." Ava buried her face in her mother's chest, sobbing quietly. "I just wanted to see Dad's schedule." Martha continued, "I was preparing to go to the library. When Ava came out of Robert's office, she was confused. She said she found something." "What did she find?" Jennifer asked. Her heart was pounding. Ava slowly sat up and pointed to the documents on the coffee table. "I was looking at Dad's computer and found a strange folder. It said, personal, confidential. Jennifer looked at the documents. There was a familiar address, the same one that had been torn up in Robert's trash can this morning. And there was a photograph of Robert with a young woman Jennifer didn't know. They looked intimate, smiling at each other." "That's not all." Ava picked up another document with trembling hands. "I found this too." It was a receipt from an antique shop. A record of the sale of Jennifer's grandmother's diamond necklace. The amount was surprisingly low, less than half its true value. "Then I saw this." Martha picked up another document. "After Ava called me, I investigated a little myself. It was a lease agreement for an apartment in Manhattan. The tenant's name was Robert Morrison. The contract had begun 2 years ago." "Mom, is Dad doing something strange?" Ava's voice was small. Is Dad going to abandon us?" Jennifer felt her whole body trembling with shock and anger. But she desperately tried to maintain her composure in front of her daughter. "I thought I needed to call Jennifer," Martha explained. "I thought this might be more than just a family matter." Jennifer took a deep breath and hugged her daughter tightly. "Ava, you've done nothing wrong. You entering Dad's office was certainly against the rules, but this situation is an entirely different issue." Ava seemed slightly relieved despite the tears in her eyes. "Will Dad destroy our family?" Jennifer couldn't immediately answer that question. Instead, she looked at Martha. "Thank you for today, Martha. I'll take care of Ava now." Martha stood up and slung her bag over her shoulder. "If you need anything, please contact me anytime. I'll keep my phone close tonight." After Martha left, Jennifer examined each piece of scattered evidence one by one. The photographs, the receipt, the lease agreement. Anger, sadness, and feelings of betrayal competed in her heart. But now, Ava was the priority. "Who's that woman in the photo?" Ava asked timidly. Jennifer took a deep breath. "I don't know. But I intend to find out." She stood up with a determined expression. "Ava, listen. This is a difficult time, but we'll get through it. You and me, together. But, what about Dad?" "As for Dad." Jennifer chose her words carefully. "There are many questions that Dad needs to answer. But for now, let's just think about you." She gathered the evidence from the table and compiled the documents into a single folder. She picked up the photograph and stared intently at the young woman's face. "Mom, I'm scared," Ava said in a small voice. Jennifer turned to her daughter and knelt before her. I'm scared too, to be honest. But sometimes in life, we have to face our fears. What's important is not letting that fear stop us. She took her daughter's hand. I will protect you, Ava. No matter what happens. Outside the window, the day was beginning to wane. Robert usually returned home around 7 o'clock. The clock showed 5:30. Jennifer had time left to decide. Let's prepare dinner, she smiled at her daughter. While we do that, we'll think about how to proceed. Before heading to the kitchen, she paused for a moment and gazed at the family photograph displayed on the mantelpiece. Carol, can you talk now? After putting Ava to rest in her room upstairs, Jennifer was making a phone call in a corner of the kitchen in a low voice. There was little time left before Robert's return home. Jenny? What's wrong? Your voice sounds strange. Carol Brady's voice on the other end sounded worried. She was a friend from college days and a lawyer specializing in family law. Jennifer explained about the evidence she had discovered, the photographs, the apartment contract, and the sold family heirloom. Jenny, this is serious, Carol said. First, keep the evidence in a safe place. Then, you should check the bank accounts. There might be other secrets. What should I do? Should I confront him? Don't say anything yet, Carol said with a determined voice. First, we need a complete understanding of the situation. Gather as much information as possible without Robert noticing. After ending the call, Jennifer went to Ava's room. Her daughter's eyes were red and swollen, but she seemed a little calmer. What should I do when Dad comes home? Ava asked. Tonight, let's act as usual. I'm not ready to talk to Dad yet. That night, Robert came home as scheduled. Dinner proceeded in a strange calmness. Ava barely spoke, Robert talked about work, and Jennifer nodded appropriately. On the surface, it was a normal family dinner, but the atmosphere was tense. Jennifer observed her husband's face. A man who didn't know that she knew everything. A man living a double life. For 12 years, she had thought she completely understood her husband, but now the person sitting in front of her felt like a stranger. After dinner, Ava retired to her room early, and Robert said he would work in his office. Jennifer went to comfort Ava and make plans for the next day. The next morning, Jennifer got up early and left the house ahead of time, citing a meeting with an important client. She met up with Carol and headed to a luxury apartment in Manhattan. How is Robert paying for this? Jennifer murmured. They cleverly confirmed at the front desk that apartment 1407 was Robert's apartment. When they knocked on the door, a young woman opened it, the same woman from the photograph. Can I help you? The woman asked. I'm Jennifer Morrison. The woman, Amanda's face drained of color. Morrison. At that moment, a small voice was heard from inside the room. Mommy, who is it? A boy, probably about 3 years old, appeared behind Amanda. He had Robert's eyes and jaw. Jennifer was frozen with shock. Amanda sent the boy back into the room and invited the two women in. How long? Jennifer asked. 3 years ago, Amanda answered. I met Robert when I was working as an assistant at an investment firm. Did he tell you that he was married? Of course. He told me you were separated and in the process of getting divorced. The apartment was decorated with family photographs, Robert, Amanda, and the little boy. Another family. Another life. Hasn't he told you he's in financial trouble? Jennifer asked. Actually, he has been worried lately. He said some investments didn't work out. Before leaving, Jennifer asked Amanda, please don't tell Robert about today. Next, the antique shop. In the car, Jennifer announced the next destination. Jenny, are you okay? Carol asked worriedly. Yes, Jennifer answered in a hollow voice. Can you imagine what it feels like to learn your entire life has been a lie? They entered a high-end antique shop, Heritage Collectors. I'm seeking information about this diamond necklace. Jennifer showed the shop owner a picture. The shop owner looked at the photo and said, "Ah, yes. A gentleman sold it last week. Robert Morrison." "Yes, that's right," the shop owner answered. "How much did you buy it for?" $25,000. Jennifer gave a bitter smile. Less than half its actual value. He said he was in a hurry. Needed cash. The necklace had already been sold to another collector, but under Carol's legal pressure, the shop owner provided information about the buyer. Back in the car, Jennifer let out a long sigh. He really seems to be in financial trouble. We've gathered enough evidence, Carol said. Are you ready to confront him tonight? Jennifer returned home and checked on Ava. Martha had come to the house, and Ava was doing homework with her. Martha, thank you for today, Jennifer said. How did it go? Martha asked in a low voice. It's worse than I thought, Jennifer answered honestly. But I'm going to take action now. Martha squeezed her hand. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Jennifer approached Ava. Honey, tonight I need to have an adult conversation with Dad. Could you go to bed a little early? Ava saw her mother's expression and sensed the seriousness. Okay, Mom. That evening, when Robert returned home, Jennifer was sitting on the living room sofa. The evidence she had gathered was spread out on the table. What are you doing? Robert asked as he approached from the entrance. Sit down, Robert. Jennifer's voice was calm but trembling. He sat on the sofa and looked at the documents on the table. She could see the color draining from his face. I can explain, he immediately said. Really? Jennifer picked up the photograph. Can you explain this? A lovely family photo with Amanda and your son. Robert fell silent. I met them today, she continued. She believed you were separated from me and in the process of getting divorced. For 3 years. Jenny, listen. And this, she picked up the receipt. You sold Grandma's necklace for less than half its value. Why? Robert held his head in his hands. I failed in an investment, he finally admitted. I have a lot of debt. I couldn't tell anyone. So instead you sold our memories. And led a double life, creating another family. It wasn't like that at first, he tried to explain. Amanda was, it was supposed to be a temporary relationship. But she got pregnant and you continued to lie. To me, to her. I was afraid of losing everything, he said in a small voice. Now, you have lost everything, Jennifer stood up. I want you to leave tonight. Jenny, please. Let's talk. Somehow find a solution. A solution? She showed an expression of disbelief. 12 years of marriage, Robert. 12 years. And for 3 years, you've been living with another family, another life. All while making sure I didn't notice anything. What about Ava? He asked. How do you plan to explain this to her? She knows, Jennifer answered. She found the evidence in your study. That's how this all started. Robert looked devastated. Let me talk to her. Not tonight. She's hurt by your betrayal. She needs time. He looked silently around the room. I'll pack my things, he finally said. Carol will contact you. She's my lawyer. Robert stared at Jennifer. I've ruined everything. I'm truly sorry. Jennifer ignored him and looked out the window. Be gone by tomorrow morning. That night, Jennifer listened from upstairs to the sounds of Robert packing his things. 12 years of marriage were coming to an end. But strangely, she also felt a sense of relief. By knowing the truth, she had taken a step toward a new beginning. "We'll be okay," she told herself as she gazed at the door to Ava's bedroom. "No matter what happens, we'll be together." Morning light filtered through the gaps in the curtains, illuminating Jennifer's face. She opened her eyes, momentarily wishing it had all been a nightmare. But the empty space in the bed beside her reminded her of reality. Last night, Robert had left. He had departed quietly. His last words were left in the form of a note. "I'm sorry. Please give me time. I want to see Ava." Jennifer read the note and gave a bitter smile. Time. After he had led a double life for 3 years without giving her any opportunity. She got out of bed and went to Ava's room. Her daughter was still asleep. Jennifer gently stroked her hair and quietly left the room. While making morning coffee in the kitchen, Jennifer made plans for today. First, contact Carol to start divorce proceedings. Next, arrange counseling sessions for Ava. And she thought perhaps she herself might need psychological support too. The phone rang. It was from Carol. "Good morning, Jenny. How did it go last night?" "He left," Jennifer answered concisely. "He didn't resist much." Faced with the evidence, there was no way to make excuses. "Good. Let's move on to the next step. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" "Yes, after I take Ava to school." As she hung up, she heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Ava appeared with an anxious expression. "Dad?" she asked in a small voice. Jennifer took a deep breath. "Dad is going to live somewhere else for a while." Ava nodded. No words were necessary. She understood in her own way the gravity of last night's events. "School?" Jennifer asked gently. "I don't want to go," Ava replied. "I understand. Let's spend the day together." They had breakfast, then went for a walk in the park. During the quiet walk, Jennifer gave Ava an age-appropriate explanation. "Mom and Dad can no longer live together. This isn't your fault. It's an issue between adults." "Will I never see Dad again?" Ava asked. "No, nothing like that. Dad loves you and wants to see you. But we all need some time. All of us." Ava nodded silently. Despite being a child, she sensed the complexity of the situation. In the afternoon, Jennifer left Ava with Martha and went to Carol's office. "I'll explain the legal process from here on," Carol said as she opened a file. "First, we need to investigate Robert's hidden assets." "He said he failed in an investment," Jennifer said. "But I don't know how much debt he has. That's the problem. We need to verify whether he's telling the truth." While going through the documents, Carol noticed some information. "Wait a minute, is this his company's investment records? Where did you get this?" "It was in his office. Along with the other documents." Carol examined the documents in detail. "This is not good. This isn't just an investment failure. There are signs that he's been misappropriating company funds." Jennifer asked with an expression of disbelief, "What does that mean?" "He may have been using company money for personal investments." "This is a criminal act, Jenny." That evening, Jennifer was trying to deal with the new shock. Her husband was not only an unfaithful man but also a criminal. The phone rang. It was from Robert. "Can I talk to Ava?" he asked. "Not now," Jennifer answered coldly. "She's still confused. And we have things to discuss." "I know, Jenny. I'm really sorry." "Were you misappropriating company funds?" she suddenly asked. Silence followed on the other end of the phone. "Why would you do such a thing?" she demanded. "At first, I only intended to borrow it," he finally admitted. "I planned to pay it back. But the investments failed, then I tried to recover with another investment, and sank deeper. How much? $700,000. Jennifer gasped. You're insane. Help me, Jenny, Robert pleaded. If the company finds out, I'll go to prison. What do you want from me? To become an accomplice? No, just. I need time. To solve everything. Jennifer ended the conversation and hung up. She stared out the window for a long time. One decision was taking shape. The next day, Jennifer took a significant step. Without Robert knowing, she had arranged to meet with the chief financial officer of his company. Coming here wasn't easy for me, she began explaining in the office. But there are things you should know about the situation my husband is involved in. She presented the evidence and explained Robert's actions. The CFO's face grew severe as the story progressed. These are serious accusations, Mrs. Morrison, he finally said. An investigation will be necessary. I understand, Jennifer said. I'll cooperate. When she left the office, she felt mixed emotions of guilt and relief. Had she betrayed her husband? Or had he betrayed her and their daughter? That evening, Robert called. His voice trembled with anger. Why did you do this? He demanded. The company called me in. They said an internal audit has begun. You made your own choices, Robert, Jennifer said calmly. Your decisions brought us here. I could go to prison. That's your responsibility. If that happens, I won't be able to pay child support, he threatened. There won't be money for Ava either. That's why I'm going to set conditions, Jennifer said. If you guarantee sufficient child support and financial support for our daughter, I'll be more lenient in my testimony. Otherwise. The negotiations continued for several days. Eventually, Robert agreed. He would try to reach a settlement with the company and cooperate as much as possible to avoid criminal charges. In return, he would establish a trust fund for Ava and guarantee Jennifer an appropriate division of property. A month later, Jennifer was signing divorce papers at the law firm. 12 years of marriage officially came to an end. How do you feel? Carol asked. Strangely, liberated, Jennifer smiled. It's been a long road, but I finally feel like I can move forward. That evening, she was having dinner with Ava. I got a letter from Dad, Ava said. He said he's sorry. And he hopes someday I can forgive him. Jennifer took her daughter's hand. Time heals all wounds, honey. For now, let's think about us. A new beginning. Outside the window, the first signs of spring were beginning to appear. A new season, a new beginning. For the first time in a long while, Jennifer could see a bright future. Morrison Estates, Jennifer Morrison speaking. Jennifer was answering the phone while looking out at the vibrant city view from the large window of her new office. On her desk were neatly arranged documents from recently completed deals. On the wall hung a certificate for Annual Best Real Estate Agent. 1 year later, Jennifer's life had changed dramatically. She had left her previous company and established her own agency. Morrison Estates had quickly established a reputation and become an important player in the local real estate market. Mom, look. As she hung up the phone, the office door opened, and 13-year-old Ava rushed in. With a bright, radiant smile, she was waving her school report card. All excellent. Jennifer smiled as she looked at her daughter's grades. That's wonderful, honey. Ava looked around her mother's successful office with interest. I was looking forward to coming here with Martha today. Where is she? Jennifer asked. Waiting at reception. I showed her my report card too. Jennifer smiled. Martha was still an important part of their lives. More like a family member now than a babysitter. Let's go for the celebration dinner as promised. Jennifer stood up and tidied her desk. As they were about to leave, the phone rang. Jennifer hesitated for a moment when she saw the caller ID. Robert? Ava asked. Jennifer nodded. Did you know Dad would be calling? He told me. He said he knows report cards come out today. Jennifer answered the phone. Hello, Robert. Is Ava there? His voice sounded gentler than before. Yes, she just came from school. Can I talk to her a bit? Jennifer looked at Ava. Her daughter shrugged and nodded. Hi, Dad. Ava took the phone. All excellent. Thank you. Well, maybe next time. After a brief conversation, Ava returned the phone. Dad wants to talk to you, Mom. Jennifer put the phone to her ear. Yes. About the necklace, Robert began. I've contacted Mr. Lang in Boston. He's apparently considering selling. If you want, I can arrange to buy it back. Jennifer was momentarily speechless. Why? As part of making amends, he said quietly. There's a lot I can't recover, but at least this might be returned. All right. Tell me the details. She ended the conversation and placed the phone down, deep in thought. What did Dad say? Ava asked. I'll tell you later. Come on, let's go meet Martha. Robert Morrison's life had changed dramatically. After serving a light sentence, he had been released, but had completely lost his credibility in the financial industry. He now worked as a front desk clerk at a motel in a small town. It was a modest, solitary life. His other family had abandoned him too. After learning the truth, Amanda had returned to her parents' home in Ohio with her son. Robert regularly sent child support and occasionally called his son, but he couldn't restore their previous relationship. His world had collapsed. But from those ruins, he was re-examining his actions. 2 weeks later, a small package arrived at Jennifer's house. What's this? Ava asked with a curious expression. Jennifer opened the package and took out a Victorian diamond necklace. Her grandmother's necklace. Do you know what this necklace is? Jennifer asked her daughter. It belonged to great-grandma, right? I've seen it in photos. Yes. It's been passed down through generations. Jennifer placed the necklace around her daughter's neck. And now, I'm passing it on to you. Ava gazed at herself in the mirror, touching the diamond sparkling at her neck. Really? But isn't this yours, Mom? It's ours, Jennifer smiled. A symbol of our strength. Ava hugged her mother. Thank you, Mom. Outside the window, the sunset was painting the city golden, as if promising a new day, a new beginning. Let's get ready, Jennifer stood up. Carol is coming for dinner tonight. They left the room hand in hand. The shadows of the past were still there, but they no longer dominated them. Jennifer and Ava were beginning a new chapter in their lives with strength and determination. On a hot summer afternoon, Rebecca Campbell was grading piano assignments in her living room with the windows wide open. The apartment was simple, with a fan providing the only coolness, but it was a sufficient home for her. Mom, look, shouted her 10-year-old son Noah, proudly holding up a volcano model he had made for his school science project. Lava, made from baking soda and vinegar, was overflowing from the small crater. That's wonderful, Noah. Rebecca smiled, adjusting her glasses on her nose. Mr. Thomas will be amazed. The phone rang, and Rebecca sighed. The caller ID showed Mother. It was their weekly scheduled call. Hello, Mom. Rebecca, Uncle Dave's wedding details are finally set. Her mother Diane's voice was filled with excitement. It's next month in Palm Beach, Florida. At a wonderful resort. You and Noah are coming, right? Rebecca frowned. On a teacher's salary, the cost of a trip to Florida would be a significant expense. Well, it might be difficult financially. Your father and I will take care of arrangements, Diane said immediately. The whole family should be there. Amy and Mark are coming, of course, and Bradley too. Rebecca closed her eyes briefly. Every time she heard her sister Amy's name, she felt her stomach turn. All right, I'll come, she finally answered. Noah would enjoy his uncle's wedding. After hanging up, Rebecca sank into the sofa. Just imagining a reunion with her sister Amy made her feel exhausted. Amy was 2 years older, married to a successful investor named Mark, lived in an upscale neighborhood, and sent her 12-year-old son Bradley to a top private school. Rebecca, on the other hand, had musical talent but chose education over a career as a pianist and taught music at the local high school. 5 years ago, her divorce from Jason had shaken her world. He had left with another woman, and child support payments were irregular. Since then, Rebecca had worked hard to raise her son. There had always been an atmosphere in the family that Rebecca was inferior. Her parents, Howard and Diane, clearly favored Amy, who had succeeded as a businesswoman. Since childhood, Amy's athletic achievements and business acumen had been celebrated, while Rebecca's passion for music had been dismissed as an impractical hobby. Standing in the kitchen preparing dinner, Rebecca heard her cell phone ring. This time it was a message from her sister. I heard from Mom. You're coming to the wedding. Bradley is looking forward to playing with your son. Rebecca sighed. Amy's messages always felt condescending. It was obvious that Bradley looked down on Noah rather than playing with him. Noah, go wash your hands. The pasta is ready, Rebecca called to her son. At the dinner table, Rebecca brought up the wedding. We're going to Florida. For Uncle Dave's wedding. Noah's eyes lit up. Really? Can we go to the beach? Probably, Rebecca smiled. Seeing her son's happy face was her greatest joy. Will Cousin Bradley be there too? Noah asked. Rebecca didn't miss the slight drop in his tone. Yes, with your aunt and uncle. Bradley always makes fun of me, Noah said quietly. The last time we met, he told his friends my clothes were cheap. Rebecca's heart ached. Noah, we don't judge people by things, do we? What matters is what's inside. I know, Noah said, poking at his pasta with a fork. But Bradley doesn't. Rebecca took her son's hand. We'll make this trip a good one. I promise. That night, after putting Noah to bed, Rebecca stepped out onto her small balcony. Looking up at the starry sky, she thought about how life hadn't been easy since becoming a single mother, especially when compared to Amy's luxurious lifestyle. Still, she was happy with her life with her son. Seeing Noah's smile and watching him grow day by day gave her purpose. The Florida trip was approaching. Rebecca took a deep breath and resolved to make the best of her time with family, regardless of how she might be treated. For Noah's sake. And for her own. Rebecca, I've made the travel arrangements. Her mother's voice came over the phone during breakfast. Rebecca took a sip of coffee and closed her eyes, holding the receiver to her ear. Amy's family is taking a direct flight from New York. I booked business class. The flight is only 3 hours, but Mark said he wanted to travel comfortably. Rebecca nodded while washing dishes. What about us? For you too. Diane's voice mixed with hesitation. I think it would be best if you went by bus. Rebecca's hands stopped. Bus? To Florida. Mom, that would take 12 hours. Yes, but the fare is less than half of a plane ticket. I know you're struggling financially, so I considered what we could afford. Rebecca leaned on the sink. The thought of taking her son on a 12-hour bus ride made her stomach hurt. But the image of her sister's family flying business class was equally painful. And, her mother continued, Amy's family will arrive 3 days before the wedding. They want to enjoy the resort early. You two can arrive the day before, so the bus will get you there in time. Rebecca slowly exhaled. All right, Mom. We'll take the bus. After hanging up, Rebecca entered the living room where Noah was doing his homework. Noah, about the Florida trip. She said, carefully choosing her words. We'll be going by bus. Bus? Noah looked up. But that's really long, isn't it? Yes, it will take about 12 hours. But we can enjoy the scenery, read books together, and play games. Rebecca tried to sound cheerful. How is Cousin Bradley getting there? There was a moment of silence. Bradley's family is flying. Why aren't we flying? Noah's voice contained an innocent question. Rebecca shrugged lightly. Bus trips can be fun too. Think of it as an adventure. Noah thought for a moment, then nodded slightly. The day of departure arrived. Rebecca and Noah headed to the airport early in the morning. The bus terminal was inside the airport, and they were scheduled to meet Amy's family and her parents first. In the airport lobby, Amy stood in her latest designer suit alongside Mark. Bradley was absorbed in his new tablet. Howard and Diane were planning to fly to Florida on the same flight as Amy's family. Finally, you're here, Amy said when she saw Rebecca. Our check-in is about to start. Good morning, Rebecca greeted flatly. How have you been? Busy. I closed a big deal on a new company project, Amy boasted proudly. Bradley, say hello to your cousin. Bradley reluctantly looked up and said, hey, before returning his attention to his tablet. Noah replied with a small, hello. What time is your bus? Diane asked. 9 o'clock, Rebecca answered. We have an hour. I see. We need to check in now, Diane turned to Amy. We can relax in the business lounge. Hey, Rebecca, Amy suddenly called. Why are you taking the bus? Planes are faster. Rebecca was at a loss for words. Well. Did you think you'd fly business class? Diane interrupted with a laugh. That's not in your budget. Amy looked Rebecca up and down and smirked. The dirty bus suits you better. Rebecca felt her face grow hot. She could feel Noah stiffening beside her. Mom, buses stink. Bradley suddenly said. When we rode one for a school trip, it smelled terrible. At those words, Amy and Mark burst out laughing. Diane also had a small smile. Only Howard seemed a bit uncomfortable. Let's go, Diane said, looking at her watch. Security checks might take time. Before her parents and Amy's family headed to the security gate, Diane turned back to Rebecca. See you in Florida. Take care. Yes, Rebecca answered flatly. Amy waved elegantly. Enjoy your bus trip. Bradley snorted and followed his parents. Rebecca and Noah stood quietly, watching until they were out of sight. Mom, Noah said in a small voice. Why does Aunt Amy and Grandma say those things? Rebecca hugged her son's shoulders. Sometimes, even as adults, people behave like children. But we're different. We'll enjoy our journey. Noah nodded. However, a hurt look remained in his eyes. Rebecca and Noah began walking toward the bus terminal. In Rebecca's mind, Amy and Diane's words echoed repeatedly. She was reminded that the family dynamics that had existed for years continued unchanged today. Before boarding the bus, Rebecca looked up at the sky through the airport's large windows. Somewhere up there, a plane carrying Amy's family was probably flying above the clouds. In luxurious seats, enjoying special meals. Let's go, Rebecca took Noah's hand and headed for the bus entrance. No one was there to see them off as they boarded the yellow coach bus. The bus began to rumble southward. Rebecca sat by the window, trying to cheer up a dejected Noah. She had just started reading a book aloud when a voice came from the adjacent seat. "That's wonderful reading." An elderly gentleman with gray hair, a well-groomed beard, and gentle blue eyes was smiling. "I'm Jack Morrison," the man extended his hand. "Rebecca Campbell," she returned the handshake. "This is my son Noah." As the conversation progressed, they discovered that Jack was also heading to the same resort. When he touched on the topic of music, Rebecca's eyes began to sparkle. "Do you teach music?" "Yes, I'm a music teacher at the local high school." "Wonderful," Jack said with genuine admiration. "I love music too." "Mom is an amazing pianist," Noah suddenly said proudly. "She also directs the school choir." From that question, Rebecca began to talk about her educational philosophy. Jack listened intently as Rebecca passionately discussed her approach that emphasized creativity and self-expression. Several hours passed, and when the bus stopped for a break, the three had a light meal together. Noah had begun to open up to Jack and was enthusiastically talking about his school science project. "So, what do you do?" Rebecca asked during the meal. Jack seemed to consider for a moment. "I work in education," he answered succinctly. As the bus started moving again and Noah had fallen asleep, Jack pulled out a business card. Rebecca took it and her eyes widened. "CEO of Harmony Innovations," she exclaimed in surprise. Harmony Innovations was a major corporation known nationwide for providing music education programs. "We're always looking for innovative educators," Jack said seriously. "Would you tell me more about your ideas during our stay at the resort?" Rebecca felt her cheeks flush with surprise and excitement. "Of course," she replied. "I'd be happy to." On their way to the check-in counter at Sunrise Resort, Rebecca and Noah encountered her parents and Amy's family in the lobby. "So you finally arrived," Diane said. "How was the bus? You must be tired." "Actually, it was a very good journey," Rebecca answered calmly. "We're staying in a poolside villa," Amy bragged. "Bradley is already enjoying jet skiing." Rebecca and Noah were shown to a small but clean room with an ocean view. That evening, a pre-wedding dinner was held. Rebecca wore a simple black dress, and Noah changed into formal attire. Entering the hotel's banquet hall, Amy's family was already seated at a table. "Oh, isn't that dress the one you wore at last year's Christmas party?" Amy said in a sarcastic tone. Before Rebecca could answer, there was a stir at the entrance to the banquet hall. Jack Morrison had just entered in a sophisticated suit. He was surrounded by several hotel staff and was clearly receiving special treatment. When Jack noticed Rebecca, he smiled and walked toward her table. "Rebecca, Noah," he called in a warm voice. "How are you?" Amy and her parents watched the conversation between the two with surprised expressions. "Is this your family?" Jack turned his gaze to the other members at the table. Rebecca introduced her family, and Jack greeted them politely. "I'm Jack Morrison. I met Rebecca and Noah on the bus." "On the bus?" Amy looked incredulous. "Are you a businessman?" Mark quickly asked. "Yes," Jack answered modestly. "I'm the CEO of a company called Harmony Innovations." The table fell silent at these words. "My goodness." Diane suddenly changed her attitude. "That's impressive. Won't you sit down?" "Thank you," Jack politely declined. "I actually have an appointment with colleagues. But I've arranged to talk business with Rebecca tomorrow." "Business?" Amy's voice was mixed with doubt. "Yes," Jack smiled at Rebecca. "I'm very interested in her approach to music education." After Jack left, the table was enveloped in surprised silence. "You are acquainted with the CEO of Harmony Innovations?" Amy asked with an incredulous look. "We sat next to each other on the bus," Rebecca said lightly. "He's a very kind person." "Why didn't you say anything?" Diane asked in an accusatory tone. Rebecca shrugged. "I didn't think it was important." "Not important?" Amy raised her voice. "He's a top industry figure. And he's going to talk business with you." Amy's voice was mixed with doubt and envy. "He seems interested in my educational approach," Rebecca answered quietly. For the remainder of the dinner, the atmosphere at the table changed dramatically. Amy and Diane suddenly began showing respect to Rebecca and asking about her work. Mark also tried to learn more about Jack. On the way back to the room, Noah said, "Mom, Grandma and Aunt Amy suddenly became nice, didn't they?" Rebecca smiled sadly. "Yes. But you didn't really change, did you? It's because Jack is famous, right? You're smart. Sometimes people judge only by external things. But what really matters is what's inside." After returning to the room, Rebecca's cell phone rang, displaying a message from Amy. "Let's have breakfast together tomorrow morning. I want to talk about your meeting with Jack." Rebecca sighed. Her sister, who had looked down on her for years, was suddenly trying to become her friend. On the morning of the wedding day, Rebecca woke up early. Last night's message from Amy was on her mind, making her uneasy. She quietly slipped out of bed and stepped onto the balcony. The morning sun was just beginning to illuminate the sea, announcing the start of a new day. A knock sounded from the door. Rebecca checked the clock, 7:30 a.m. She checked that Noah was still sleeping before opening the door. "Good morning, sister," Amy said in a bright voice. She was dressed in perfect makeup and high-end casual wear. "Shall we go to breakfast?" "Just the two of us." Rebecca was a bit confused but nodded. "Wait a moment. I'll leave Noah a note." The two took a seat at the hotel's terrace restaurant. A waiter poured coffee as they took in the magnificent view overlooking the sea. "I was surprised last night," Amy started the conversation, "to find out you know Jack Morrison." "It was a coincidence," Rebecca answered concisely. "But it's a wonderful opportunity," Amy said eagerly. "Considering your situation." Rebecca frowned. "My situation? Come on, let's be realistic," Amy lowered her voice. "Single mother, low salary. Having connections with someone like Jack would be good for Noah too, wouldn't it?" Rebecca silently drank her coffee. "So, what are you going to talk to him about?" Amy asked. "About my approach to music education." Amy laughed. "Just that. You need to think bigger. Harmony Innovations is a huge corporation. They might give you an opportunity." "I just want to share my passion," Rebecca answered quietly. Amy sighed. "You're always like that. Can't you be more ambitious?" She touched Rebecca's hand. "I'll help you. I'll talk to Jack about you too." "That's not necessary," Rebecca said immediately. "It's fine," Amy smiled. "I want to help as your sister." After breakfast, Rebecca returned to her room feeling anxious. From past experience, Amy's help was often for her own benefit. In the room, Noah was awake and eating breakfast. "Are you looking forward to talking with Jack?" Noah asked. "Yes," Rebecca answered. "But I'm a bit nervous." "You'll be fine, Mom," Noah said with confidence. "Jack likes the way you teach music, right?" Rebecca felt warmed by her son's pure trust. The wedding began at noon and was held in a beautiful garden along the beach. Rebecca and Noah sat a little distance away from Amy's family and her parents. The ceremony was moving, and the bride and groom's love seemed to radiate to those around them. While moving to the reception venue, Rebecca spotted Jack. He was wearing a sophisticated suit and talking with some businessmen. As she approached, Jack interrupted his conversation and greeted her with a smile. "Rebecca, you look beautiful today." "Thank you," she smiled back. "Jack, this is really..." "Oh, Jack." Amy's voice interrupted. She was approaching with Mark. "So glad to see you again." Jack politely greeted them. "Amy, Mark. Looking forward to your meeting with Rebecca," Amy said in a sweet voice. "I thought I might help you get to know her better." Jack seemed a bit confused. "Yes, of course. It was at 3 p.m., right?" Amy asked. "May I join you briefly?" The whole family is impressed with Rebecca's educational philosophy. Rebecca was speechless with surprise. She couldn't understand why her sister was trying to intrude on her meeting. "Actually," Jack began to say when the wedding coordinator started directing everyone to the reception hall. "Let's talk later," Jack said to Rebecca and began moving with the other guests. The reception began, and Rebecca took her seat with Noah. Amy and her parents were seated at a different table. During the meal, Rebecca occasionally glanced at Jack. He was enjoying conversation with what looked like important people. By the time dessert was served, Noah had gone to the restroom. When he returned, his expression was clouded. "What's wrong?" Rebecca asked worriedly. Noah looked around anxiously. "Mom, Aunt Amy was saying terrible things to Jack." Rebecca's heart began to race. "What was she saying?" "Aunt Amy told Jack that you're struggling with money and that you've had problems at work," Noah continued in a small voice. "She said you need an opportunity." But when the uncle asked, "What about her abilities?" Aunt Amy said, "Well, they're average." Rebecca felt her face growing hot. "Where did you hear this?" "In the hallway near the restroom. I wasn't seen, but I could hear their voices." Noah's eyes were filling with tears. "Mom, why is Aunt Amy always so mean?" Rebecca squeezed Noah's hand. Though she felt anger at Amy's betrayal, she tried to maintain composure in front of her son. People sometimes have jealousy or insecurities. But it's okay, the truth will eventually come to light. "We need to tell Jack the truth," Noah said seriously. "Noah." The conversation was interrupted as Jack approached their table. "Rebecca, may I speak with you?" Rebecca stood up. "Of course. Please bring Noah along too," Jack smiled. "How about the hotel gardens? We can talk quietly there." The three left the reception hall, feeling the gazes of people. Rebecca didn't miss Amy watching them with a suspicious expression. Sitting on a bench in the garden, Jack said gently, "I just spoke with your sister." Rebecca tensed and straightened her back. "I see." "Yes," Jack frowned slightly. "She told me interesting things about you." Noah suddenly interrupted. "They're lies." "Noah." Rebecca tried to reprimand her son, but Noah wouldn't stop. "Everything Aunt Amy said is a lie." Noah looked at Jack with a serious expression. "Mom is the best teacher and is respected by her students. She has never caused trouble at school, and she's not looking for a job because of money." Jack looked at Noah with a surprised expression. "Noah, that's enough," Rebecca gently gripped her son's shoulder. "No, please continue," Jack said quietly. Noah took a deep breath. "Aunt Amy has always looked down on Mom. When we had to take the bus, she said, 'The dirty bus suits you better.' Even Bradley said, 'Buses stink.'" Noah's voice was trembling. "But Mom never talked back. She's always endured it." Jack was silent for a while. "I see," he finally said. "This explains everything." Rebecca tried to apologize to Jack, but he raised his hand. "No need to apologize. Actually, I felt something was off when listening to your sister. She described you as a completely different person from the one I met on the bus. Amy. Rebecca searched for words. My sister sometimes changes reality to suit herself. I admire your son's courage, Jack smiled. It takes great courage to speak the truth sometimes. Rebecca nodded. Noah is an honest child. Anyway, Jack changed the subject. Let's get back to our original purpose. Rebecca, your approach to music education is truly innovative. After hearing you talk on the bus, I wanted to work with an educator with your perspective. He opened his briefcase and took out some documents. At Harmony Innovations, we're planning to develop a new educational program. I'd like you to participate. Rebecca's eyes widened. Really? Your creative approach and practical experience are exactly what we're looking for, Jack said with a serious expression. We can pay more than double your current salary. We also guarantee creative freedom in program development. Rebecca was speechless. This was an opportunity she had never dreamed of. If you need time to think. I accept, Rebecca answered immediately. Thank you for this opportunity. Wonderful, Jack was delighted. We'll finalize the details next week. He stood up. Now, shall we return to the reception? The cake cutting should be starting. When the three returned to the reception hall, Amy immediately approached. How did it go? She asked in a sweet voice, but her eyes were anxious. Jack smiled calmly. Rebecca is a wonderful educator. I'm impressed by her talent and passion. Amy's expression clouded. I see, but what I told you. I understand your concern, Jack said coolly. However, I'm the type who judges by what I see and hear myself. He turned his gaze to Rebecca. We've finalized a contract between Rebecca and Harmony Innovations. We plan to roll out her music education program nationwide. The color drained from Amy's face. Contract? Yes, Jack continued. Her talent and innovative approach were exactly what we were looking for. Rebecca stood silently watching Amy's shocked expression. Inwardly, she rejoiced that her sister's scheme had backfired. Well, isn't that great? Amy tried to cover up. Congratulations, Rebecca. I was rooting for you. Rebecca just smiled. Thank you, Amy. Diane and Howard approached. What happened? Diane asked. Jack explained the situation, and her parents showed expressions of surprise and, at least in her father's case, pride. Rebecca, why didn't you say anything? Diane asked, looking confused. I didn't have a chance to, Rebecca answered calmly. Jack looked at his watch. Excuse me, but I have other appointments. Rebecca, Noah, thank you for a wonderful weekend. He smiled at the two. I'll contact you next week. After Jack left, a moment of silence fell. Amy was clearly upset, and Mark also looked confused. Congratulations, Rebecca, Howard said for the first time with genuine warmth. I always believed in your talent. Noah squeezed his mother's hand and looked up proudly. Rebecca took a deep breath and looked around at her family. Thank you, she said quietly. For the rest of the day, the family dynamics subtly changed. Amy became more silent, and her parents showed more respect toward Rebecca than before. However, Rebecca knew this wasn't a true change but merely a reaction to her new success. At the end of the wedding, Rebecca and Noah walked on the beach. As the sunset turned the sea red, Rebecca said to her son, You were very brave today, Noah. I just wanted to tell the truth for you, Noah answered, making footprints in the sand. I'm so happy to have you, Rebecca hugged her son. Me too, Noah smiled. Mom, what's going to change now? Rebecca looked at the sea. Many things will change. But the most important thing, that we're together, that won't change." The two continued walking quietly along the beach. A sense of a new beginning enveloped them along with the Florida twilight. 1 year later, Rebecca stood in front of the large window in her spacious living room, gazing at the city view. "Mom, look. I finished it." Rebecca turned at Noah's voice. He was now 11 and had grown a bit taller. He was showing her a music app he had created in his programming course on his tablet. "That's amazing, Noah," Rebecca said, embracing her son's shoulders. "You really have talent." In a year, Rebecca and Noah's lives had changed dramatically. The contract with Harmony Innovations had turned into a major project to roll out her music education program, Creative Harmony, nationwide. The program had been more successful than expected, adopted by hundreds of schools, and Rebecca had become known as an educational innovator. They had moved from their small apartment to a comfortable Manhattan condominium provided by the company. Noah attended an excellent private school, developing his talents in both music and science. "There's an email from Jack," Rebecca said, looking at her smartphone. "He's confirming next week's workshop." Jack had become her good friend and mentor, always supporting her career. Thanks to his advice and guidance, Rebecca had become a respected figure in the field of music education. The phone rang, and Rebecca sighed. The screen displayed, "Mother." "Hello, Mom." "Rebecca, how are you?" Diane's voice had become much gentler than before. "I saw your interview article. I'm so proud of you." Rebecca smiled, but there was a hint of irony in her smile. Her parents' attitude had completely changed with her success. Those who once called her passion for music an impractical hobby now claimed they had always believed in her talent. "Thank you, Mom," Rebecca answered calmly. "And, about Amy," Diane's voice lowered a bit. "She's going through a difficult time." Rebecca listened silently. Amy's life had changed significantly over the past year. Her company had suffered major losses due to a real estate market collapse, and she had lost her high position. Furthermore, her relationship with Mark had deteriorated and was on the verge of divorce. "She wants to get in touch with you," Diane continued. "I hope you can reconcile." Rebecca gazed out the window. Amy had contacted her several months ago too. A sudden friendly message asking for business advice. "Mom, family is important," Rebecca carefully chose her words. "But true family relationships are based on respect and love. For a long time, I couldn't feel that." "But you've succeeded now," Diane said, sounding slightly dissatisfied. "Isn't it time to forgive?" "This isn't about success or failure," Rebecca said firmly. "If Amy has truly changed, I'm ready to talk anytime. But for now, I want to keep my distance." After hanging up, Rebecca sat on the sofa and exhaled deeply. "Aunt Amy?" Noah asked. He seemed to have heard his mother's conversation. "Yes," Rebecca smiled. "Grandma wants me to make up with your aunt." "Won't we see Aunt Amy and Grandpa and Grandma anymore?" Rebecca sat next to her son. "We might see them someday. But I've learned what true family means. It's not just blood ties, but caring for and supporting each other. Like Jack." "Yes," Rebecca smiled. "And like your classmates' families and the people on our team." The intercom rang, announcing that the driver had arrived. "Let's go," Rebecca stood up. "It's almost time for our flight." Rebecca and Noah left the luxury condo and got into the waiting car. They were heading to London for the international expansion of the Creative Harmony program. Arriving at the airport, they could see the same terminal where they had been humiliated a year ago. Rebecca paused slightly, remembering that moment. "What's wrong, Mom?" Noah asked. "Just thinking," Rebecca smiled. "About how far we've come." Heading to the check-in counter, an attendant greeted them politely. Miss Campbell and young master, business class, right? This way please. Rebecca and Noah were guided to a dedicated lane. Entering the business class lounge, a luxurious space spread out before them. Mom, look, Noah called from beside the window. Outside the airport, a large coach bus like the one they had once ridden was parked. Rebecca stood next to her son, looking down at the bus. If we hadn't taken that bus, we would never have met Jack. Sometimes the slower road has wonderful encounters and discoveries, Noah repeated Rebecca's words. Rebecca hugged her son. That's right. As boarding time approached, they left the lounge. Walking through the airport, Rebecca thought, sometimes life's most difficult paths lead to the most beautiful destinations. She was now in the middle of a journey sharing her talent and passion with the world. And most importantly, she was making that journey with her beloved son. Amanda Parker turned off her alarm at exactly 7 o'clock on a harsh winter morning, just as she always did. It was still dark outside, and the February morning in Michigan was mercilessly cold. She got up carefully so as not to disturb Brian sleeping beside her. Her husband, a senior engineer, had been working late the night before on an urgent code fix. Looks like another long day ahead, Amanda sighed softly as she quietly left the bedroom. Walking down the hallway, she paused at Emma's door. She gently opened it to check on her daughter's sleeping face. 7-year-old Emma was still sound asleep, clutching her doll. Amanda smiled at that innocent sleeping face and quietly closed the door. When she went downstairs, Betty was already in the kitchen. Her mother-in-law was already perfectly groomed and brewing coffee. Good morning, Amanda, Betty said in a polite voice. I've made coffee for you. Thank you, Betty, Amanda replied, making an effort to sound cheerful. Ever since Betty had moved in a year ago after losing her husband, the morning atmosphere in the house had contained a certain tension. Betty, a former high school teacher, excelled at playing the perfect mother-in-law. Neighbors envied Amanda, saying, "What a wonderful mother-in-law you have," but Amanda knew, beneath the surface lurked something cold. Are you busy today too? Betty asked, watching Amanda take a sip of coffee. Yes, the quarterly financial deadline is approaching, Amanda replied. As a financial analyst at a large accounting firm, this time of year was especially busy for her. Betty just nodded slightly and said, "It's almost time for Emma to wake up. I'll wake her and prepare breakfast." Thank you, Amanda said, though she couldn't help feeling uneasy. Lately, something had been off about Emma. Her daughter, who used to be so lively in the mornings, had become strangely quiet over the past few weeks, especially when around her grandmother. When Amanda returned after showering and changing into her work clothes, Emma was already at the table. But her usual smile was gone, she was just silently stirring her cereal. Good morning, Emma, Amanda kissed the top of her daughter's head. Did you sleep well? Emma just nodded slightly, refusing to make eye contact. Answer properly, Emma, Betty said in a stern voice. Your mother is asking you a question. Yes, I slept well. Emma mumbled in a small voice. Amanda placed her hand gently on her daughter's shoulder and asked, "What are you planning to do today? Anything fun happening at school?" Emma just shrugged her shoulders. Emma, fix your posture, Betty admonished. Shrugging like that isn't ladylike. Amanda suppressed the urge to talk back. She wanted to avoid confrontation with her mother-in-law and didn't want to start an argument in the morning. Instead, she turned back to Emma and said gently, "That's okay. You can tell me about school at dinner time." On her way to the front door after finishing her preparations for work, Amanda paused briefly and looked into the living room. Betty was brushing Emma's hair with a stern expression. Emma's face was tense and stiff. Amanda felt a pain in her chest. "I'm heading out," Amanda said to both of them. "Have a good day," Betty responded with a perfect smile. Emma just waved her small hand. There seemed to be something she wanted to say in her eyes, but she remained silent. As soon as she arrived at the office, Amanda was engulfed in waves of work. Numbers, reports, meetings. Even so, in the back of her mind, she was worried about Emma. During her lunch break, she was having lunch with her colleague Carol in the company cafeteria. Emma's been acting strange lately, Amanda confided while poking at her salad. She used to be so energetic, but now she's become withdrawn. Carol nodded understandingly. Did something happen? Is she being bullied at school? I don't know, Amanda shrugged. When I ask her, she just says nothing. Kids can be like that sometimes, Carol said. But maybe, could your mother-in-law have something to do with it? Amanda was at a loss for words. She had suspected the same thing herself but was afraid to voice it. Betty plays the perfect mother-in-law on the surface. But when she's around, the atmosphere in the house gets heavy. I don't have any evidence. Amanda continued. And if I tell Brian, he'll probably just say, respect my mother. Brian was a wonderful husband, but when it came to his mother, he was blind. Betty always played the role of the caring mother and ideal grandmother in front of her son, and Brian never questioned it. That's tough, Carol said sympathetically. But if you're concerned about Emma's changes, you need to find the cause. Amanda nodded. Yes, I'll keep an eye on things a bit longer. Later that afternoon, Amanda's cell phone rang. It was from Emma's school. Mrs. Parker, Emma is in the nurse's office. She doesn't have a fever, but she says she's not feeling well. Amanda became worried and replied, I'll come get her right away. After getting permission to leave early from her boss, she rushed to the school. When she arrived at the nurse's office, Emma was lying on the bed. Her color wasn't bad, but her eyes showed signs of fatigue. What's wrong, Emma? Amanda sat next to her daughter and placed her hand on her forehead. Emma remained silent for a while but eventually said in a small voice, Mom, I just wanted to come home. Amanda hugged her daughter. It's okay. Let's go home together. In the car, Amanda asked Emma again. Is there something worrying you? Did something happen at school? Emma shook her head. No. At home, perhaps. Amanda chose her words carefully. Did something happen with Grandma? A momentary flash of fear appeared in Emma's eyes but quickly disappeared. No. I'm just tired. Amanda didn't pursue it further, but in her heart, she was determined. She would definitely find out what Emma was afraid of. When they arrived home, Betty greeted them with a concerned expression. Oh my, what happened? Are you all right, Emma? She just seems tired, Amanda answered. I'll let her rest in her room. Betty nodded and said, yes, let her rest. I'll bring some tea. That night, after Brian returned home, Amanda tried to share her concerns with her husband. Brian, don't you think Emma's been acting strange lately? She's become quieter than before. Brian shrugged tiredly. Isn't it just growing pains? Kids change. But she seems especially tense around your mother, Amanda said. Brian frowned. Are you suggesting there's something wrong with my mother? Amanda chose her words carefully as she spoke. No, I'm just worried that Emma seems to have something she can't talk about. You sound like you're suspicious of my mother. Brian's voice had a defensive tone. Mom loves Emma, she's just strict. She's from an older generation. Amanda stopped pushing. It seemed better to avoid an argument tonight. You're right, maybe I'm just overthinking things. On a weekday morning, Amanda, who had turned off her alarm at the usual time, was hurriedly getting dressed. She had an important presentation today and was focused on preparation. However, A small cry from Emma's room made her stop in her tracks. "Emma?" Amanda opened the door and peered in. On the bed, Emma was holding one of her ears, her face contorted. "What's wrong?" Amanda rushed to Emma's side and placed her hand on her forehead. She didn't seem to have a fever. "Mom, my ear feels strange, it hurts," Emma said tearfully. Amanda grew concerned and carefully examined Emma's ear, but couldn't see anything unusual from the outside. However, it was clear from the way her daughter winced in pain that something was not right. "How much does it hurt?" Amanda asked gently. "It hurts a lot, inside," Emma answered in a small voice. Amanda made an immediate decision. "I understand. I'm going to take the day off work, and we'll go see a doctor." She quickly took out her phone and contacted her boss. Fortunately, her understanding boss said, "Family comes first," and agreed to reschedule the presentation for another day. Next, Amanda called the reputable Hopkins ENT clinic in town and was able to get an emergency appointment. "It's going to be okay, Emma. We'll see a doctor right away," Amanda tried to reassure her daughter. Brian had already left for work, and Betty was preparing breakfast. When Amanda explained the situation, Betty looked surprised for a moment but quickly put on a concerned face. "Oh my, that's terrible." "Of course, I'll come with you," Betty said. "Thank you, but it's fine." "I'll take her," Amanda politely declined. For some reason, she felt reluctant to have Betty with them in this situation. Betty slightly furrowed her brow but quickly softened her expression. "I see, all right. But let me know if anything happens." In the car heading to the clinic, Amanda and Emma were unusually silent. Normally, Emma would sing songs or ask questions about the scenery outside, but today was different. She just silently looked out the window. Amanda occasionally glanced at her daughter through the rearview mirror, her heart clenching at the anxious expression on her face. "Emma, is there anything you want to tell me?" Amanda asked gently. Emma just shook her head slightly. When they arrived at the clinic, the waiting room was relatively empty. After checking in and filling out the necessary forms, Emma's name was called almost immediately. "Emma Parker," the nurse called out cheerfully. After being shown to the examination room, Dr. Rogers soon entered. In his mid-50s, Dr. Rogers was known for his mild demeanor and gentle manner, making him particularly popular with children. "Hello, Emma. What seems to be the problem?" Dr. Rogers asked kindly. "My ear hurts," Emma replied in a small voice. "How much does it hurt? When did it start?" The doctor continued his questions calmly. "Since last night." Emma hesitated, glancing briefly at Amanda. "But it got really painful this morning." Dr. Rogers nodded and said, "I understand, let's take a look," as he took out an otoscope. He began carefully examining Emma's ear. During this time, Amanda held her daughter's hand, trying to comfort her. She could feel Emma's small hand trembling in hers. "Let's take a closer look," Dr. Rogers said, taking out a special camera. "With this, we can see inside your ear on the screen. It won't hurt, Emma." Emma obeyed the doctor's instructions without fear. Dr. Rogers pointed the camera into Emma's ear, and the inside of her ear appeared on the monitor. Amanda was watching the monitor but, lacking medical knowledge, couldn't tell what was normal and what wasn't. However, she suddenly noticed Dr. Rogers's expression change. He frowned and stared intently at the monitor. "Is something wrong?" Amanda asked anxiously. Dr. Rogers hesitated for a moment before saying, "Mrs. Parker, could you come over here? There's something I'd like you to see." Amanda, trying to remain calm despite her agitation, told Emma, "I'll be right back," and stood beside the doctor. "Look at this," Dr. Rogers pointed at the monitor. On the monitor, a metallic-looking object was visible deep in Emma's ear. Upon closer inspection, it appeared to be a fragment of an earring. "What is that?" Amanda asked in confusion. Various questions swirled in her mind. How did a piece of an earring get inside Emma's ear? There's a piece of an earring embedded in her ear. Moreover, Dr. Rogers lowered his voice and continued, this is not in a position where it could have naturally entered. It's highly likely someone deliberately inserted it. Amanda was shocked into silence. A mixture of anger and fear welled up inside her. "No way," she said in a hoarse voice. "Mrs. Parker, we need to approach this situation carefully," Dr. Rogers said, maintaining professional composure. "Has Emma shown any other changes in behavior recently?" Amanda remembered the recent changes in Emma's behavior and felt a tightness in her chest. Her becoming withdrawn, her tension especially when her grandmother was around, it all started to make sense. "Actually, she's become more withdrawn lately." Amanda hesitated. "She seems especially anxious when her grandmother is around." Dr. Rogers looked at Amanda with a serious expression. "Mrs. Parker, I have a duty to report this. This is, potentially child abuse." Various thoughts whirled in Amanda's mind. Betty, doing this to Emma. She didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right in front of her eyes. She looked at Emma with trembling hands. Emma was sitting on the bed, watching her mother with an anxious face. "Emma, how did this get in your ear?" Amanda asked gently. She tried to be as non-threatening as possible. Emma remained silent, shaking her head fearfully. The color of fear was evident in her eyes. "Did someone put this in your ear?" Amanda asked again. "Emma, Mommy won't be angry, please tell me the truth." Emma began to cry and said in a small voice, "I can't say. I'll get in trouble. I'm scared." Those words nearly broke Amanda's heart. Dr. Rogers said, "Let's remove the foreign object first," and carefully extracted the fragment of the earring. He placed the small metal piece on a tray and then checked the condition of Emma's ear. Fortunately, there doesn't appear to be any serious damage. However, there are signs of a mild infection, so I'll prescribe antibiotics, Dr. Rogers explained. After the examination, while Emma was with a nurse getting her medication, Dr. Rogers spoke privately with Amanda. "Mrs. Parker, this situation is serious. I have a duty to report it to Child Protective Services, but first, you need to understand what's happening in your home." Amanda nodded. "I understand, thank you. I'll get to the bottom of this." Before leaving the examination room, Dr. Rogers told Amanda, "This needs to be thoroughly investigated. The child's safety comes first." With her mind in turmoil, Amanda tightly held Emma's hand. As the two left the clinic, their expressions were grave, foreboding the difficulties that lay ahead. In the car on the way home from the clinic, Amanda tried to talk with Emma. She carefully chose her words, trying not to frighten her daughter. "Emma, can you tell me? How did that piece of metal get in your ear?" Amanda asked gently, glancing at Emma through the rearview mirror. Emma remained silent, staring out the window. She was drawing patterns on the glass with her small finger. "Did someone do this?" "Emma, if someone was mean to you, Mommy will protect you," Amanda coaxed gently. "Mommy won't be angry. I just want to know." Emma sighed softly and, after a long silence, whispered, "I can't say. I promised." Amanda felt a pang in her heart. Someone was making Emma keep quiet. Betty's image flashed in her mind, but she had no concrete evidence. She needed proof. What kind of promise? Amanda was about to ask, but Emma seemed to have already closed the conversation. She looked back out the window and maintained her silence. When they arrived home, Betty greeted them at the door. With perfectly groomed hair and clothes, she wore a concerned expression. "How did it go? What happened?" Betty asked Amanda as soon as they crossed the threshold. Emma has inflammation in her ear, and they prescribed medicine, Amanda replied without going into detail. Somehow, she felt reluctant to tell Betty everything. She decided to follow her instincts. "Oh, that's terrible." Betty tried to place her hand on Emma's head, but Emma flinched slightly. Betty seemed to notice but said nothing. "Emma, go rest in your room for a bit," Amanda told her daughter. "I'll bring your medicine later." Emma silently went up the stairs. Watching that small back, Amanda strengthened her resolve. Tonight, when Brian came home, she would tell him everything. That night, when Brian returned home, Amanda called him into the study and told him in detail about what was found in Emma's ear and the doctor's assessment. "You're joking, right?" Brian said with an expression of disbelief. "Someone deliberately putting a fragment of an earring in Emma's ear, that's impossible." "That's what the doctor diagnosed," Amanda replied quietly but firmly. Based on the condition of Emma's ear, it wasn't in a position where it could have entered naturally. "But who would?" Brian started to say, then stopped. A look of understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're not suspecting my mother, are you?" Amanda exhaled deeply. "I'm not saying anything. But think about it, Brian. Emma's recent behavior, how tense she is especially around her grandmother. It's impossible that Mom would hurt Emma." Brian raised his voice. "She might be strict, but she loves her granddaughter. There's no way she would do something so terrible." Amanda was disappointed by Brian's reaction, but it was what she had expected. She spent a sleepless night, continuously thinking about how to reveal the truth. The next morning, after dropping Emma off at school, Amanda made plans to leave work early. She asked her colleague Carol to cover the afternoon meeting. "Are you okay? Did something happen?" Carol asked with concern. "It's about Emma, there's something I need to investigate," Amanda answered briefly. She couldn't share the details, but Carol seemed to sense from her friend's intuition that it was a serious matter. "I understand. I'll take care of everything, so do what you need to do," Carol said firmly. Amanda first went to Emma's school and met with her teacher, Mrs. Johnson. "Have you noticed any changes in Emma? Does she show signs of being threatened by someone?" Amanda asked frankly. Mrs. Johnson frowned and thought for a moment. "Nothing particularly concerning. She just seems a bit quieter recently. She used to actively raise her hand in class, but that has decreased over the past few weeks." "What about her friendships?" Amanda inquired further. "Those seem unchanged. She still plays normally with other children during breaks," the teacher answered. The information from the school was limited. Amanda next visited Emma's pediatrician to check her recent medical records. There were no abnormalities, but there was a note about introverted tendencies in the recent examination record. "Emma used to be a very sociable and active child, but recently she's become a bit introverted," the doctor said. "It happens sometimes. However, if it continues, you might want to consult a child psychologist." Amanda followed that suggestion and made an appointment with Dr. Kim, a well-respected child psychologist in the area. She decided to take Emma there directly after school. In Dr. Kim's warm office, Emma was initially tense but soon seemed to adjust to the environment filled with toys and picture books. "Emma, you can talk about anything here," Dr. Kim said kindly. "I'll keep your secrets." However, even in front of the specialist, Emma remained tight-lipped. She answered simple questions but froze when asked about home or her grandmother. After the session, Dr. Kim told Amanda, "We need time to build trust. It's difficult in just one session. But there's something that seems to be frightening her." Amanda resolved to observe the situation at home more closely. She decided to focus particularly on the relationship between Betty and Emma. On the surface, Betty always treated her granddaughter kindly. But what Amanda noticed was the subtle change in Betty's attitude when she was present versus when she was absent. When Amanda was nearby, Betty would gently remind Emma to use please and thank you. However, when Amanda returned from the kitchen, she sometimes found Emma looking anxious. It was clear something was happening, but there was no evidence. Amanda checked her work schedule, wanting to know more about times when she was away from home. Especially Wednesday afternoons, when she regularly went out. During those times, Betty and Emma were alone together. One Wednesday, Amanda made a bold plan. She asked Carol to cover her phone calls during lunch and decided to return home unannounced. She told her colleagues she was going to a lunch meeting with a client and left the office. "Amanda, if something serious is happening, you might need help," Carol said worriedly. "I'll be fine." "I need evidence first," Amanda replied with determination. Amanda parked her car a little distance away and quietly approached the house. She thought what she was doing might be a bit excessive, but Emma's safety was her top priority. When Amanda quietly opened the door, she heard Betty's angry voice from the second floor. It was completely different from her usual gentle tone, cold and harsh. "You know what happens when you don't listen. I'll tell you once more, this is how a lady sits." A chill ran down Amanda's spine. She quietly climbed the stairs and stopped in front of Emma's room. She could hear Emma crying from inside. "Crying won't help. I'm doing this for your own good. If you don't listen, I'll put something in your ear again." Amanda froze in shock. The moment her worst suspicions turned to certainty. Betty had put the fragment of the earring in Emma's ear. Anger and fear threatened to explode within her. She forcefully opened the door and entered the room. Betty was standing in front of Emma, holding an earring in her hand. Emma was trembling with fear, tears streaming down her face. "What are you doing?" Amanda's voice shook with anger. Betty turned around in surprise and immediately changed her demeanor. The speed of this change made Amanda shudder. "Oh, Amanda. I was just teaching Emma proper etiquette." Betty regained her composure and put the earring back in her own ear. "I told you about the earring fragment found in her ear. You put it there, didn't you?" Amanda asked in a quiet but barely contained voice. Betty's face changed color, and she denied it, saying, "What are you talking about? I would never do such a thing." Her eyes showed a flash of fear for a moment, but quickly changed to a defensive expression. Amanda rushed to Emma and embraced her. Emma's small body was trembling. "It's okay now, Emma. Mommy's here." Amanda tried to comfort her daughter. She took out her smartphone from her pocket and activated the recording app. This would be evidence. For Brian, and if necessary, for the authorities. "Emma, can you tell me the truth? Did Grandma put something in your ear?" Emma, through her tears, finally began to speak. "Grandma said she'd punish me if I didn't obey." According to Emma, Betty had been forcing proper ladylike behavior on her for several months, and when she didn't comply, she would receive various punishments. It started with just scolding, but gradually escalated, and recently, when Emma didn't sit properly, part of an earring was inserted into her ear. "It hurt so I cried," then she said if I didn't listen more, she'd push it in deeper. Emma said in a trembling voice. "She said I mustn't tell anyone. If I did, it would make Mommy and Daddy sad." While feeling intense anger, Amanda tried to maintain her composure. She took Emma to another room and said, "Wait here, I'll be right back," before returning to confront Betty. "What you did to Emma is abuse. I want you to leave this house right now," Amanda said resolutely. Betty hardened her attitude. "I'm doing this for her own good. If you coddle her like you do, she'll struggle in the future. Go ahead and tell my son. He understands my parenting methods." Amanda took out her smartphone and started recording. "Then say it again. Tell me that you put the earring in Emma's ear." Betty was momentarily flustered but quickly regained her composure. Oh, gathering evidence is useless. Brian will never doubt me. We'll see about that, Amanda said quietly. Tonight, when Brian comes home, I'll tell him everything. What was found in Emma's ear, and your actions. Betty sneered. Go ahead. But whose side do you think Brian will take? The mother who raised him? Or the wife who's trying to protect his daughter? Amanda interrupted. You don't understand the seriousness of your actions. This could become a legal matter. The color drained from Betty's face. At that moment, Amanda felt she had gained the upper hand. That evening, when Brian returned home, Amanda called him into the study and told him in detail about what was found in Emma's ear and what had happened that day. You must be joking. Mom would never do such a thing, Brian said in disbelief. I didn't want to believe it either. But I have a recording. Amanda took out her smartphone and played Betty's voice. The recording included Betty threatening Emma and later admitting that she had used the earring as punishment. Brian lost color in his face and collapsed into a chair. Is this real? Ask Emma yourself, Amanda said quietly. Brian went to Emma's room and talked with his daughter for a long time. When he returned, his face was hardened with sadness and anger. I need to talk to Mother, he said with resolve. Brian knocked on the door of Betty's room. Amanda insisted on being present, and the three faced each other. Mom, I need you to explain about the earring fragment found in Emma's ear, Brian said with a serious expression. Betty acted like a different person in front of her son, tearfully denying it. You're doubting me too. I only thought of Emma. I heard the recording, Mom, Brian said quietly. Betty's expression changed completely. She fell silent, and eventually her attitude became defensive. That child needed discipline. You two are too lenient. In my day. This has nothing to do with the times. Brian raised his voice, which was unusual for him. There's no justification for hurting a child. Especially your own granddaughter. A heated argument broke out between Betty and Brian. Betty tried to justify her actions, and Brian expressed deep disappointment in his mother's behavior. I respected you. But to do something like this. Brian held his head in his hands. Amanda calmly intervened. Betty, your actions constitute abuse. This could potentially become a legal issue. Betty panicked. Legal? You're not planning to call the police, are you? That depends on you, Amanda replied firmly. Emma's safety is our top priority. As long as you're in this house, Emma isn't safe. Brian exhaled deeply and said, Mom, I want you to leave by tomorrow. Betty initially resisted but eventually partially admitted to her actions. I was just being strict. My parents were the same. That's what love is. That's not love, Brian said sadly. Love doesn't hurt others. Especially children. Amanda told Betty, I'll help you find an assisted living facility. But you can't return to this house. Betty finally broke down and cried, Where will I go? We'll figure that out. But right now, Emma's recovery is our top priority, Amanda replied. Before leaving the room, Brian took Amanda's hand and said, Thank you. For showing me my mother's true face. For protecting Emma. Amanda squeezed her husband's hand back. We're family. Protecting Emma is only natural. That night, Amanda and Brian went to Emma's room and told her, everything's going to be okay now. Grandma won't be here for a while. Relief showed in Emma's eyes, and she seemed truly at ease for the first time. Really? I won't get scolded anymore. Never again, Amanda assured her. Mommy and Daddy will always protect you. Brian hugged Emma and said, Daddy promises too. I won't let anyone hurt you. Emma fell asleep in her parents' arms, feeling secure for the first time in a long while. After leaving their daughter's room, Amanda and Brian sat facing each other in the living room. "I'm sorry, Amanda, for not believing you about my mother," Brian said in a tired voice. "It's not your fault," Amanda said gently. "What's important is from now on, we need to help Emma's wounds heal together." The two quietly shook hands, making a new resolution to repair their family bonds and create a home where Emma could once again feel safe and smile. 3 months had passed. The harsh Michigan winter had ended, and as spring sunlight streamed through the windows one morning, Amanda stood in the kitchen with a cup of coffee in hand. The calendar had Emma, psychologist session, circled in red. Today would be the 8th session. Betty had moved to an assisted living facility and had begun seeing a psychiatrist as part of family counseling. The diagnosis revealed that Betty herself had grown up in a strict household, which had deeply influenced her views on child rearing. She had received physical punishment in her childhood and believed that was proper discipline. Emma's ear had completely healed, and she was gradually regaining her former bright personality. Weekly sessions with the child psychologist were helping to heal her emotional wounds. She had suffered from nightmares at first, but recently the night crying had decreased. "Mom, I'm taking a sandwich today," Emma ran to the breakfast table and said energetically. The sparkle had returned to her eyes as she talked about her school field trip. "Okay, I'll put in whatever you like," Amanda replied, gently stroking her daughter's hair. Amanda and Brian's relationship had also changed. Overcoming this crisis had strengthened their bond. Brian had deeply reflected on his mother's actions and now showed trust and gratitude toward Amanda. "If you hadn't come home early that day," Brian often said, "what matters is that we're here now." "That Emma is safe and happy," Amanda always replied. Brian had adjusted his work schedule to spend more time with his family. Following professional advice, he consciously created one-on-one time with Emma to rebuild their trust. Saturday morning walks in the park had become their special time together. On the weekend, they went for a family picnic. The local lakeside park was adorned with spring flowers and bustling with many families. Emma laughed heartily and ran around, something she hadn't done in a long time. "Mom, look." Emma came running with a bouquet of flowers. "Aren't they pretty?" Amanda hugged her daughter and said, "They're beautiful." At that moment, she felt everything was moving in the right direction. Meanwhile, Betty was gradually adapting to life in the facility. She was slowly beginning to understand the gravity of what she had done and was confronting herself through counseling. On the wall of her room hung a picture drawn by Emma. Brian had brought it the previous week. "Will Emma ever forgive me?" Betty asked her counselor. There was regret in her eyes. "Rebuilding trust takes time. But your willingness to change is an important first step," the counselor replied. Betty began writing letters to Emma and Brian. Finding words of apology was difficult, but this was the beginning of her atonement. She paused her writing and gazed out the window. While trying to understand her past actions, she also felt the difficulty of forgiving herself. Amanda didn't harbor resentment toward Betty. After the anger came a desire to understand. She herself sometimes felt the challenges of parenting. The difference was that Amanda sought help and tried to learn. "Someday, if Emma says she's okay with seeing her grandmother, we'll consider it then," Amanda told Brian. They were lying in bed, sharing the end of their day. Brian nodded and replied, "I hope that day comes." He was still in the process of repairing his relationship with his mother. Weekly phone calls and monthly visits were the beginning of their new relationship. That night, as Amanda watched Emma's sleeping face, she thought about their family's journey. They had just begun the long process of repairing damaged relationships, but they were becoming a stronger family that respected each other more than before. And most importantly, Emma could once again feel safe and smile. The next morning, When Amanda woke up, Emma was standing beside her bed. "Good morning, Mom," Emma said brightly. "I'm thinking of writing a letter to Grandma today. Is that okay?" Amanda was surprised but touched by her daughter's strength. "Of course. That's a wonderful idea. Grandma did wrong things, but the teacher said everyone makes mistakes," Emma said with a serious expression. "I'm still angry, but if Grandma changes, I think I might be okay with seeing her someday." As Amanda hugged her daughter, she felt Emma's small hands awkwardly patting her back. Tears welled up in her eyes. The healing journey had just begun, but the light of hope was definitely there.